Alright. So, I take it you've seen my last War Room video, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably? Okay. So, what I want to talk about was ways to, fix multiplayer just in general and things people can do, because that was sort of the last video I had planned in this short series. So there are just a lot of problems that seem to come up over and over. And I mentioned a couple of them already, right? Coalition's a big one, and people just kind of off doing their own thing and not really part of the multiplayer is another one. But I think there are some general trends and ways of approaching the games that aren't really useful. I don't think people are aware that they even do it, I think it's just something that kind of comes with the territory. You hop into a multiplayer game and you played single player before, so you just kind of do the same thing. Or maybe you've played other games and you're not used to playing a game that runs for 8 weeks, 4 hours a week kind of thing. So I think there are just some like guidelines that we can come up with that can help with that. And that's what I was hoping to talk with those of you who are here today, talk with you about that. So any ideas before we get started?
I mean, I think I'm a
Awkward
bit cynical
silence.
about
That's
the
what it is.
present, like even the possibility.
Sorry, say again?
Like I'm a bit cynical about even the possibility, because with all the games, it's like it's an unfair game by its nature.
Yeah, it's true. But I think the way players approach it can fix a lot of things. All right, let me give you an example. I've been thinking of a few things just, for weeks really. And there was a great example that came up recently. And I think Beast, you're in the Tuesday game, right?
Kind of.
You're aware of what's been going on, right?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
there when the hell went down. I kind of
Okay.
got 8. My country kind of got 8, so yeah.
So you're playing Scandinavia or Sweden, right?
No, well, in this latest game, I was playing Austria.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you got
I kind of
eaten
got
too.
partitioned.
All right.
It was
Well,
unfortunate.
this is my interpretation or what I got from it because I wasn't there, right? Basically, you have a Germany and a Russia that, for various reasons, decided to go way over infamy. It went up to like 150, and this is Victoria 2. So 25 is the point where you don't really want to pass 25, but they went up to 150, and why Germany did, I don't exactly know. But from what I understand, Russia did is they had a CB on Sweden or Scandinavia to take a core, and then they declared war, didn't take the core, and then took 100 war score worth of other stuff, and then truce broke, did the same exact thing, declared war for CB, didn't take the CB, and took all 100 war score worth of other stuff, and just kept doing that over and over and over until they basically annexed the country. Is that accurate?
That is exactly what happened.
Okay. Now that used to be a player, right?
It used to be. Not when he killed it, though.
Okay, so
It never came back.
it was a player, and then the player left, or whatever, wasn't there, and while he wasn't there, he annexed the country, which is something I talked about a couple of war rooms ago, where people do that sort of thing. Someone doesn't show up in a session, and now it's open season. But here's that part is bad, but it's not the worst thing that happened in the situation, right? The worst
No.
thing the worst thing that happened in this situation is that after doing this, he lost a war. On a technicality as I understand it, but he lost a war and then he rage quit. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
That's exactly what happened. He got contained.
Right. So he didn't even lose anything. He lost some prestige. He lost his military in the short run. But then he left.
Well, when you have Gurren on Germany,
Yeah.
and he's just gonna keep attacking him over and over and over again.
In
Containing
theory.
him well, he's gonna do it. He said he's gonna take 100%. Well, he's already way over infamy limit, so
Yeah.
why should he not just keep going over? So he's just gonna keep attacking Russia, containing them, and taking 100 war score with the land.
Okay. So the first sort of guideline that I would draw from this, and I think it's a great example, is I've got a text, a WordPad open. I'm going to start writing this stuff down. But I think the first thing I would say is if you're going to do something that's going to take you over the limit, whether that's AE or infamy, be prepared to face the consequences. And each of these has like, a positive. Well, there's two sides to the coin, right? So on the one hand, if you're going to do it, be prepared to face the consequences. And then on the other hand, don't do it if you're not going to face the consequences, whatever those happen to be. So if you're going to go up to 150 infamy, be prepared for people to contain you. And if you use these sort of gamey exploits to take hundreds of war score worth of land that realistically you shouldn't be taking, don't be surprised when other people turn around and do it to you. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
Is there any part of that that doesn't sound reasonable?
Well, I mean, you have to make sure that there's actually a way to punish people for doing that.
Well, I mean,
as it stands,
I mean,
as it stands now, Gurren just wasn't.
that is the punishment. Gurren is the punishment.
Well, I
But
mean,
then who's going to punish
yeah.
Gurren?
Yeah, that's the question.
Well, it would have to be the other players.
Well, Russia's
if
gonna
the
be
point of-
dead.
What are we doing?
France.
We are discussing ways to improve multiplayer, E4 and Victoria 2.
Because Biden, who is playing France, is just refusing to fight.
Yeah.
Gurren.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute too. I mean, we want to talk about all kinds of stuff, but this is like the first concrete thing I've been, wanted to bring up. 'Cause it's a really good example of ways that, and this isn't just limited to this one Victoria 2 game. This happens all the time. Say in an EU4 game, someone expands a bit too much or whatever, they get a coalition, then the coalition attacks them and they rage quit. You've seen that happen, right?
Yeah, E4 is a bit different from how Victoria 2 works, though.
It is. In principle, it's similar.
Well, one thing is, I think EU4 has a lot more of its own mechanics preventing you from doing stuff like that. Whereas Victoria 2, you can take, you could literally full annex Russia and probably have no problems.
Sure. Yeah.
That is just pure gain for you, no loss.
I do think it's up to the other players to police that, though. It doesn't have. If it weren't for people who are afraid of Gurren, which I think is the problem, he's really good, but he can't take on everyone else simultaneously, and he said that, he can't win an 8v1, and if it were up to everyone else, if they did actually form a reasonable, sensible coalition to deal with them, then I don't see a problem with that, and I don't see why they shouldn't. So if Gurren says, if Russia does this thing and Gurren says, I'm going to punish you for it, that's fine. But if Gurren now wants to benefit from it in a way that makes him the big bad, then I don't see a problem with everyone else saying, okay, well, now that you have done this and you have gone way over infamy, we're going to knock you down a peg as well. And there's no diplomacy too. Like, what do you do after you rage quit, right? I mean, Russia could have done something. He could have actually conducted some diplomacy and not been in that situation. Because I was like reading the Discord while this was taking place, right? It was just like during the session, he just like up and quit. And then everything went to Discord. Because if it weren't on Discord, I wouldn't have heard about it. You guys would have been talking about it in the chat. But it wasn't in the chat, it was in the Discord, so that meant he'd already quit, right?
Yeah.
So why did that happen? Why didn't he go... Why was there no diplomacy at all?
Well, the thing is, when he went way over infamy, this really pissed the UK off, so the UK wasn't going to help him.
Okay.
France has just refused to help Doc the whole game.
Who's the UK?
And UK's J-Rock.
Okay.
He's one of the GMs.
Okay.
And so since France and Italy was just doing whatever France told them, I guess, because I don't know why, but that's what they're doing there.
Okay.
So France isn't gonna help him. Italy isn't helping him. Austria's dead.
Okay.
Russia.
That was you, right?
Yeah, that was me. I got kind of killed.
How did you get
They
killed?
went, Oh, I just got attacked every 5 years, and they took like 100 war score worth of land
Okay.
every 5 years. So
That's something
you
else I
know,
wanted to
same.
address, but that's another point.
But like, I wasn't there the session before. Somebody else played Austria,
Okay,
so
that's
I came back to
yeah.
a treaty that was gonna kill me.
What was this treaty?
Since
I heard about it, but I didn't read it.
oh, basically what it said is that in return for letting Germany form, Göring, who was on Germany, was gonna give Russia like 5 states. And
Okay.
it actually said in the treaty that every member signing the treaty had to be over infamy by the end of the session or they'd break it.
Why?
That's a good question.
It's really dumb.
I mean, Göring liked it because he got to form Germany and not die. And I guess Gok liked it because he got to go 150 over infamy.
Why? I don't understand why there would be a provision where everyone has to be over infamy by the end of the session.
The name of the treaty was a meme treaty.
Okay.
Like, there's no rhyme or reason to. I don't understand it. They ruined the game, but.
I mean, I guess it's some
You'd have
kind
to
of
ask
weird
one of them.
insurance, like, right? If everyone's over infamy, then you can't say, well, you're over, so I'm gonna come attack you. Well, at least not morally. You lost the high ground at that point.
Yeah, like the only two nations who haven't gone over infamy at this point are the UK and Japan.
Mm-hmm. Well, who's 570 playing? Just curious.
He's USA. He's like 50 infamy. He's like eating Mexico.
Okay. Well, that's, I guess, to be expected if everyone's going over. All right, so I'm just gonna write down like rule number 1, which is not, in order of importance or anything, but I'm just gonna say, all right, if
I wasn't over infamy, by the way.
okay, be prepared to face the consequences of your actions, and that could be interpreted in any number of ways, right? If you do something stupid, be prepared to face the consequences, and that could be anything interpreted as stupid, and that I would say going way over infamy qualifies.
So the rule is don't rage quit.
Huh?
So the rule is don't rage quit if you make a mistake.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, is don't rage quit.
But one thing that's, like, for example, everyone was saying they wouldn't help cheese on Russia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, sort of the problem here is, or at least from what I see, just comparing it to, say, real-life World War II, everyone realized Stalin's not as bad as Hitler, therefore we help Stalin. Whereas in these multiplayer games, people don't think like that. They think, oh, I don't like Russia, therefore we let Germany annex them when we know we're going to have to deal with Russia later. You know what I mean?
It's very short-sighted.
Like, they were all like...
I mean, I thought that was initially the plan in World War II. But then when it came that they were kind of on the losing side of that, it only made sense to ally with Russia.
Mm-hmm. USA was sending stuff to Russia from, like, the beginning, weren't they? Like there was really no way for a direct alliance other than verbal. Know what I mean? Where Vicky 2's a bit different.
I think we're straying from topic.
Okay, yeah, but like, what I'm saying is people need to sometimes just suck up and ally with someone they don't necessarily want to.
To be fair,
like,
Cheese was kind of the main instigator in that retarded treaty.
Yeah, I agree. I was gonna play in that game, but yeah, there was cheese there.
So Vlad's got something to add here, which I'm just going to read out. It says, doing something unexpectedly smart can also have bad consequences. That's true. If you shoot way ahead of the pack in whatever way, it might piss people off. If you do, like in EU4, if you say take over a region and now you become way more powerful as a result, then yeah, people can come after you as a result of that, but you should be prepared for that, I think.
So the main problem, at least from a perspective of EU, because I haven't really played Victoria, is that alliances tend to stick together, which is Gaku's point in his last video.
That's a big part of it. But before we get to that, I really want to get through this, So let's say, well, even if you take alliances into consideration, if we can break this down to the simplest example. Like, if you attack someone, be prepared to be attacked in turn, right?
Yeah.
And don't
Right.
be surprised when they do. And then, if you lose, so be it. That doesn't mean you have to quit the game. If you go way over infamy, as in the Tuesday game, be prepared that someone else is going to use the same exact tactic against you. You know, truce breaking and, you know, treaty cheese. And, you know, turn it back on you. And the thing that really pisses me off about what I've heard about this Tuesday game is that even if Gurin did what he said he was going to do, Russia wasn't... It couldn't possibly be unplayable. You know? I mean, Russia, even with a third of its land, is very playable. So...
Or just nobody wants to play a country that's already gonna get boned over.
Yeah. But, again, that's sort of the bed he made, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't want to lie in it.
Sure.
Issue.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's a problem. Is this something... it's something that needs to be addressed.
It also depends on the players. Like, I would never have signed a treaty like that ever.
Yeah.
But if you get the right players in the right countries, they can really screw a game.
And, yeah, let's see. There's a couple things in the chat. What's happening? We're talking about ways to make multiplayer better in Victoria 2 and EU4. And, we are planning to have games starting in January. So, yeah, if you're around and in the various discords, then presumably you're welcome to join. I don't know what we're going to be doing in this group. It might be EU3 actually, at least for the first game. But those of you who don't have it can very easily get it for minimal price. If you know where to look, if you know what I'm saying.
Be on sale right now probably because it's the winter sale.
Hell, you can probably get it for like $5.
Probably pick a smaller country if you're not very good.
Yeah.
Don't pick a GP. You don't know what you're doing.
Okay. Let's see what else.
Yeah, EU3 complete is $374 right now.
Holy shit. Yeah, go get it. If you don't even want to pay that much, you can get it other ways. But that's like nothing.
Gaku can't say illegal activity on YouTube and get in trouble.
I don't think that's what he was implying. I don't know why you would say that, Oscar.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, what are you implying here?
Alright, so, there
I'm
were
implying there are shitty Russian websites in the world.
Alright, before we get to like other specific examples, related to that last video I put out about the coalitions, I had one rule that I proposed at the end that I think would solve part of that, right? Which is having to split up your, or, you know, limiting how many diplomatic actions you can have with players over a number of sessions, essentially. So you couldn't just permanently be allied and stay allied the whole campaign is the idea. But I was thinking past that, like, that could be the rule, but what would be the ideal, right? So I think the ideal extends it a bit further, but it's in a way that I think is going to meet some resistance. So like in single player, it makes sense why you would ally the strongest country, right? You'd ally the strongest country because they help you the most, and they would be most likely to kill you if you didn't. So of course you want to ally them, and it makes sense that you would do that in multiplayer too. But when you do it in multiplayer, it kills the game. So, a sort of a two-sided coin thing, I would say, ideally, you shouldn't be allying the most powerful country players, and the most powerful country players should recognize that and not be allying the weak nations around them. What do you think of that?
Now, I've already told you this, but like I said, what I think your rule's going to do isn't going to stop the larger nations from allying each other. It'll just stop them from allying officially. What it'll do is it'll stop the larger nations from helping the smaller nations take off.
Maybe.
Like any small nation that is not in the best position they could be in, like Milan, is just going to not be able to keep up.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
here's a perfect example, like Sardinia and France. Like, France is really big, really strong, and they can help Sardinia. But Sardinia is really weak, and they need somebody to help them if they want to become Italy. If France can't ally
Well,
Sardinia, Sardinia is pretty boned.
I don't think that's true. If they want to form Italy as fast as possible, they need help. But if they're going to form Italy, they can do it without the outside help.
Okay, now imagine, I don't play enough Vicky 2 to know how long it takes, but imagine they do it twice as fast with France, and then that gives them time to go somewhere else.
Mhm.
But instead of France helping them, France then decides to attack, say, Spain, which would, and while France is getting stronger, faster than he would normally because he's not committing resources to helping Sardinia, Sardinia is getting stronger slower. So Italy is going to be weaker than normal, and France is going to be stronger than normal.
I mean, there's also Austria, who's gonna have Austria has an interest in screwing Italy over. So if
Yes,
France
and
is protecting Sardinia, what's stopping
Yeah.
Austria from
yeah,
cheating on Sardinia?
even more sake because there's that doesn't account for the fact that what if a player wants to attack you? Like, yeah, so in that situation where France can only help Sardinia for 1 or 2 sessions,
Mhm.
or however much, Austria can just attack Sardinia the day after France can no longer help them.
Okay, well, we'll picture this. Let's say France wasn't allied with Sardinia, okay? At all. But they had friendly relations and diplomatically made it clear that they would defend against outside aggression.
Then is that not taking the diplomatic action? If they are openly saying that is yes, that's a guarantee of independence, Gaku. Even if it's not a mechanic in Vicky 2, that what you're saying here would no longer apply in EU4 unless it's just because remember earlier when I messaged you, I said the problem is going to be people will just unofficially do it until they need to do it, and you're like, you don't think that would be a problem?
I think that's, well, I mean, it could potentially be exactly the same situation, but I don't think it would be. Because what you'd have then is people actually discussing what they're doing and why. So if France were to say, I'm going to defend Sardinia Piedmont, and then Austria says, okay, I'm attacking, well then France and Sardinia Piedmont ally, and then, you know, there's a defensive alliance for the session, right? But if no one attacks Sardinia Piedmont, then there is, well, in Victoria there would be this sort of guarantee, right? And but it's not a universal guarantee, or it doesn't have to be. For, well, let's see,
Wait,
what's
is that
another
just how it
example?
works usually, anyways? Like, France isn't always gonna help Italy or Sardinia do whatever it wants ever.
No, it's usually the
Against
opposite. Everyone who's allied goes full in, because we saw that in the surveys.
I mean, it could
If-
be, could not be. Like,
If your
this-
ally is attacked, you go full in, commit
like,
everything
that-
to
that's
defending
very,
them.
like, I mean,
Well,
if
no, most
UK
people said
attacks
if their
Italy from
allies
home-
attack someone else, they won't go full in. But if
That's
their
correct.
allies get attacked, they will go full in.
That's
Well,
that's
I
exactly
mean,
it.
how much can you really help at a certain point? Like, if UK with their huge navy attacks Italy for their colonies, what's France gonna do? They're just like, well, sorry, dude, I can't help you anyways. Why would I even bother joining?
So there was a Sunday game recently, and that was the one I was playing England. And before it all went to shit, there was a little while there was a Portugal, and then there wasn't a Portugal, and then there was a Portugal again. And for part of it, I was competing with Portugal for colonies back before I died. And France had allied Portugal and was guaranteeing them. And we came to essentially an agreement where if I had just attacked Portugal, then here comes France and they're going to kill me, right? But I said I'm specifically attacking Portugal for one colony, and I attacked Portugal and I took that one colony, and then France didn't intervene. And I think that's the sort of situation you get if you don't have formal alliances with people the way you normally would in Victoria. So if you have to make that diplomatic statement before you declare the war, then it's not the coalition game. Then it's, do I really want to take part in this war? Is it a reasonable war on its own? And, you know, am I going to be okay with it playing out without getting involved? And I think that's something that would happen if you don't have everyone allied the way they have been typically.
I mean, that happens to a certain extent already. Like, people like to tell others, like, all right, I'm going to attack this guy. If you want to join, fine. But if you don't, I'm just going to take colony A, B, and C.
But in that situation, why wouldn't France always want to stop?
Or they
Well,
want
no,
to, they
because
can,
it's
they,
not worth France's resource, which is
yeah,
the thing.
they want to get blockaded for no reason.
But I think, like, that happens anyway.
What happens anyway?
Maybe, like, people just not fighting wars because it's not worth the effort.
Yeah,
It's a lost cause to begin with.
Like, that already happens.
it sometimes happens. But more often people will join and just sit there. For example,
Yes,
in
but if-
EU4, there's a penalty for not joining defensively,
Yeah.
right? And even if you get called in offensively, there's a penalty for not joining. And there's even a penalty for leaving early. So unlike Victoria, where you can join defensively and then just wipe peace out, you can't really do that in EU4. So
Yeah. In Victoria too, there probably needs to be some sort of game-imposed penalty requiring to stay in a war.
Well, no, that's what Gaku's trying to avoid. He's trying to avoid people joining wars that they're not going to fight in.
I think as a sort of general concept, and this was something I was going to bring up later, but I think people should favor, what to put it,
Temporary
fair
alliances over permanent
well, that
ones.
too. No, I'm thinking like the wars themselves. Because people typically come to the defense of other people when they've been attacked. When your allies are attacked, you always come in and you always commit. I think if it is a fair conflict, and this doesn't make sense from any standpoint aside from a gameplay standpoint. If it's a fair conflict, I think you should let it play out. Like if France is declaring war on Netherlands, then you come to the defense of the Netherlands because they're just going to get destroyed. But if France is fighting the Ottomans, then you just let them fight it.
Yes, but the problem comes in that, well, if the Ottomans beat France and France is your ally, what do you do next?
Then you deal with the consequences.
And do you mean, like, now say for just arbitrary numbers,
Mhm.
say Ottomans is 100 out of 100 in terms of power, and France is 80 out of 100,
Mm-hmm.
and you're 70 out of 100.
Yep.
If you join the war, there is no chance Ottomans wins,
Sure.
but theoretically, it's not fair for France versus Ottomans.
Sure.
Now, do you join and make it where absolutely no chance Ottomans wins, or stay out? Like,
I mean, for conceptually, defense has the advantage, right? So I would say if the Ottomans attack France in that situation, you let it play out. And if France attacks the Ottomans, then maybe some small nation could help France. But you wouldn't have like 2 or 3 majors in a coalition against the Ottomans, because that would be way tilted in one direction.
See, Gaku, I think a great way to fix the permanent alliances would be do something like this. Have the winner of the game be determined by an out-of-game score, and have at the end of every session just this massive coalition war where you really fight it over nothing but getting the points. The winning side gets X points, like gets
well,
2
he's not
points,
trying
the
to
losing side
figure
gets
out.
1.
He's
And
not
that
trying to
way-
determine winners. He's
Yes.
trying to determine how to keep games going.
That would keep the game going as well, because you have a fun big war to look forward to that doesn't result in the game losing.
I
Because
disagree.
the one thing I don't like with destroying coalitions is I enjoy big wars. But if people form in coalitions, you're going to have the issues with coalitions anyway. And if you just force coalitions that don't have any effect on the game otherwise than that, and if they're randomized every session, it prevents that people sticking together. Because you don't want to attack another player with 2 players and have a really weak player that then may end up being on your team for the war that matters for you to get score.
That's just going to create a more single-player and multiplayer situation if you're specifically avoiding weakening players until that big war because they might be on your team.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
also
but it's gonna make diplomacy more interesting because you are gonna want to eventually.
No,
weaken
because
players
then
to strengthen
everyone is
yourself.
going to not kill anyone.
there's this idea. I've been trying to think about it in terms of like game theory and stuff, which I'm not an expert in by any means, but you know, there's an idea where everyone can win in a situation where there isn't just like one clear winner, right? So I feel like there is a situation where you can have individual players that might not have the best game possible, but they're not getting annexed either. But as a result of everyone generally having a good game, the campaign itself can be good. Because I think what happens now is you just have one runaway winner, and that runaway winner just stomps on everyone else. And the people that can't really stand a chance just feel terrible about the situation.
But
I think.
but Gaku, that's what these games lend themselves to.
Well, it doesn't have to. That's what I'm
but
saying.
that's the core Yeah, it's very hard not to do that. That's how the core mechanics of the game is built.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
that's
saying,
What happens in single player EU4?
and I think
That's
it's
what happens
yeah.
in single player
that's-
Victoria 2.
That's why you
And
don't
it's
play
hard
single player and
to-
multiplayer.
Yeah, but it's hard to work against single player and kind of core mechanics of the game.
It is, but I think we could do it.
Sometimes-
What?
Yes.
I think Mayo gives a bit more opportunity to apply that because it's
Yeah.
not expand, and
Yep.
you win.
But
There's-
Gaku, it's even
I
like
also
the
think Mayo sort of compounds on the issue of when you lose a war, you lose the game. If I
True.
full occupy France a single time and leave him occupied for even a year, his
Mhm.
nation is going to be in turmoil for the next 50 years, and it's going to be a 15-year truce time. He is going to be worthless for 50 years
Yep.
with a 15-year truce time. Whereas in vanilla, if I full occupy France, he's going to be worthless for 1 year
Yep.
with a 15-year truce time.
That's the one thing I don't like. I like a lot with Neo, but that's the part I hate about Neo. Is that if you get beat once, it's a mod that induces. It is more reasonable to rage quit out of Neo of losing one more than vanilla. Because in
Well,
vanilla
one
you
thing-
may lose an
I
X
think if
amount of
people
land.
would be more willing to give up a war, like for example, if France realizes he's going to lose the war, give up an amount of land and not 100%, and people should be more willing to accept less than 100%.
You know, I was thinking that earlier today. That's a big part of it. You know, we
Like-
have peace negotiations that last like 30 minutes to an hour. And it's because people want to min-max exactly how many points of land they're going to get. And it's like, how about just have the conclusion of the war and be satisfied with the fact that you won and take less than 100%, you know, and not try and
to
kill
have
the other
game
player.
Continue on.
Yeah.
Well, we can look at history for this. Taking 100% is not
It-
always perfect.
No,
it can
in history,
sometimes
no
lead
one
to
ever
enemies.
took 100%.
Yeah.
The Versailles is
The
as
Mongols
close to
took
100%. Well, Versailles is as close to 100% as possible, and it left people very, very bitter and very, very angry. France couldn't have demanded much more out of Germany without Germany just continuing to fight the war.
You know what had an excellent peace negotiation system was Victoria 1, is you could actually have bilateral peace agreements. You could have one person gives up land to the other,
Yeah.
and the other person gives up land to the first. You could actually trade land that way. You say, okay, well I lost, but hey, I'm gonna get something in return.
Which is what happened in real life. Like,
Yeah,
America won the Spanish-American War, and then bought land from Spain.
mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, because they couldn't really enforce the peace on Spain.
I'm gonna mark that as number
really-
2.
Yeah, they could have. They could have just occupied the land. Spain
But
could
they could-
not do anything.
Yeah, but they couldn't have stopped the fighting. They couldn't have invaded mainland Spain very successfully.
Well, they would have had to go. America would have blockaded them or something.
So I'm gonna mark this as
But-
number 2, which is be satisfied with less than 100% war score. And it goes both ways too, because like if you're, you know, it's this golden rule kind of thing. Because if you're not doing it, then other people aren't gonna do it to you, right? So if you're not trying to kill everyone that you go to war with, then hopefully, if you're on the losing end, then they're not going to do it to you,
That's
right?
not always the case. Some people
It's not
are
always the
different.
case.
Some people are kind of dicks.
But I
And
think
that's
that
where rule number 1 comes in.
No, rule number 2 should be rule number 1 should be don't be a dick.
All it takes is
That
one
doesn't
person
work.
to start the trend.
yeah. But I think these aren't rules. They're guidelines for how you as an individual could play the game to make things better. And it's
Don't
like
be a dick should be up there.
that doesn't
Just-
work. That's always rule number 1, and it means nothing because people have different interpretations of what being a dick is. Like
Don't do something that will make the game unplayable for another person.
again, everyone has a different
But you see,
opinion on
that's
that.
not necessarily true. For example, the Ottomans should full annex Wallachia. Like, you know, like if
Yeah.
there's an Ottoman and a Byzantium player, one of them is going to die.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be don't do anything that's going to kill another player. Sometimes
It's
killing another player is necessary.
Don't do
This-
something that will ruin another player's nation without them having a chance to fight back.
No.
Is
Well,
that better?
that's
But
not necessarily true
they
either.
had the war. The war is the chance to fight back.
Yeah.
You're trying to make a rule out of something that's really a guideline for how
The
to
thing that
act.
you don't want to mess up is the balance of power in the game, not necessarily people's opinions on the game.
Well, no. And a great example of this is I was playing in EU4 game, right? Well, they didn't have the Muslim whatever alliance restricted. So France, I was playing in Spain. This was in some random lobby I joined. I was in the game for I got the Iberian wedding, and this day I got the Iberian wedding. The Ottomans, France, and Morocco all supported independence in Aragon, because the day I got it, I had been rivaled with them before because the AI rivaled me, which is something I can't control, so I get insta-declared war on by the Ottomans, Morocco, and France, and no allies join me because there's no way you can physically win that war. And they're taking well over 100% war score for nothing.
Yeah,
When I
that's
can't-
that's
for
a shitty
20%.
situation that I don't think should have happened if there'd been players concerned about continuing the game. But if you got this random lobby with people that just don't give a fuck, then why wouldn't they do that?
Yeah. It wasn't a random lobby, it was a lobby of a group of friends who were actually going to continue the game. And then
Well, they
we
did
let
a
Dez
really
join,
bad
and Dez
job
did
of
that bullshit.
Really bad job of trying to continue it. I got a few things I want to read out just from people in the chat. So David
For
says,
something else, I don't think Castile losing Aragon is necessarily the end of game.
"Yeah,
end of the
that's
game.
true. Yeah,
It is when they are
Like at
surrounded.
that point, like when that happens, you just give up Aragon. Don't contest. You can't win that war. Why destroy your nation fighting it? Well,
Exactly,
I
but
mean,
the-
theoretically, you could win the war with mountain forts, but
No, this was at the very beginning of the game. I got it really, really early. I got
Did
it in
you?
like 1450.
did you have Navarra?
No, I did not have Aragon actually had I didn't even have time to get Aragon subjugated Navarre, right?
Okay, then you had Navarra because you had Aragon. Oh well, no, because Aragon.
No,
declared
Aragon was
independence,
fight.
Yeah, you should have just accepted that. Just
Yeah,
accept
but-
the peace and take over Aragon over time.
But the problem was I still had to face a Moroccan, France, and Ottoman alliance.
They're not gonna stay allied to Aragon. Just let Aragon go.
They're not going to do that. Trust me. It's those situations.
Who's
that
not
are
going to
very-
do what?
have you ever tried diplomacy?"
Yes, I tried diplomacy. I had an alliance with England and Austria. They both said fuck it because it was so early in the game. Neither one of them could stand up to that alliance. It's a very tough alliance to stand up to the Ottomans, France.
If it's early in the game, the Ottomans
Well,
are
it's-
significantly weaker than Austria, and England's
Not
roughly
in
equivalent
vanilla.
to France.
In
vanilla,
vanilla?
yes.
This was
In vanilla.
All right, well, I'm gonna read these out. So David says he knows part of the problem is that people don't really care about their country. Like many times, people just YOLO and then pick another country. I think that you should get one country and be committed to it, I think was the end of that statement. Which they did try and do more or less in the Demian game, which is unless your country was just like completely destroyed and practically annexed, you had to stay with it. And actually the first bit of that game where I joined, I was playing as Scotland with like 40 development. which you know, I just sort of ended up that way. And you know, everyone else had like hundreds, maybe thousands of development, and I had 40 because that was the country that I ended up with, and I wasn't initially allowed to move off of it for that reason. So it has its there is some benefit to doing that, but you also run the risk of people getting really pissed off if they no longer want to play their country, which I think there is some point where it is reasonable to let people move, but then you run into the same issue with rage quitters. And
here's a point that's reasonable. I'm in a Slazer game, and I assume you guys will think this is fair. I was playing a game, right? It was a game that Gurren was hating. Anyway, well, he had taken all of my nation, but the Amazons in my capital, and I was Brazil. There was nothing I could, even with diplomacy, right? There's nothing I could do. The U.S. had been cuffed fairly hard, and I think you had New York at the time. There was nothing I could physically have done in that game, even with diplomacy. Who's going to save a nation who's 2 states, who's like a less than 100k pop? When there's major wars going on in Europe. There comes a point in which no nation is viable, at which every nation is no longer viable. And that's the situation on which it should be kind of, maybe a way you could do this rules-wise for swapping would be the people in the region have to agree that your nation is, like the people around you have to agree your nation is thoroughly screwed.
But the people around you would prefer you to not be on that nation, because then
That's
they can
true.
annex you.
Yep.
Or the people in general in the game have to vote on it, maybe. Somewhere in there. So that it's fair-ish.
I don't see a problem with that.
Versus just letting someone quit and repick a nation. I know I'm
like,
terrible for that.
Let's say you were playing. Well, yeah, you hopped on Naples and then left before the war had even started.
Well, that's because there's nothing I could do, and it really pissed me off.
So you accept the loss?
No. The thing is it just pissed me off how they handled the situation. He's like, no, you know what? Screw you. You're not going to do everything I told you to do. Okay, screw you.
As I recall, they did offer. I don't remember who that was, but they offered you a deal, and you refused the deal, and then the war started, and then you rage quit. But
I think it was over excommunication or something.
I don't know. It was Sicily,
what
I think.
What it was is what it was is AI had excommunicated them, and I lost the papal whatever. So I couldn't un-excommunicate them. They thought I didn't do it, so they instant declared war on me.
It wasn't for that, though.
They said,
it was
nope, war, instant declared and killed.
I don't think that's true.
Or fought me. That's exactly what happened. They told me, I'm going to declare war on you unless you excommunicate me. And then the Pope died like a year later before I had a chance to do anything about it. That's what the deal was, and then when the Pope died and I lost control of it, they declared war on me because I didn't un-excommunicate them. And the AI papal state hated him, so he wasn't going to do it either.
What I remember is someone said, I want to buy Sicily off you, and you said no.
No, it wasn't Sicily. It was all about an excommunication. It had nothing to do with Sicily.
Maybe we're thinking of different games. Maybe this isn't the first Italy campaign you've rage quit.
No, I haven't rage quit another. I've only done 2 Italy I've never done the only multiplayer Italy campaign I've done with in EU4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, EU. This wasn't about Sicily. That may have been someone. It definitely wasn't about Sicily. It was about excommunication. I remember this vividly because it pissed me off to no end. And that day I had it up to here already, so metaphorical my hand above my head.
So another example I can give you related to this though was
CK2 is the example I was going with.
No, like the last Victoria 2 campaign that I edited and uploaded, and I stopped recording, editing, and uploading because of the way it ended, and I was just, it left me in a really bad mood, and I didn't want to play anymore for a while. That's why I haven't really been in the games and recording them. But I was playing Russia, and there were the coalitions that formed as expected, and my side was on the losing end, and I made efforts during the game to get the other coalition to stop being a coalition by reaching out to individuals and trying things. And even though I wasn't technically in the coalition that Gurren said I was in, they treated it like I was, so in effect I was in a coalition that I wasn't part of, right? Now,
You're like the USA in a European coalition, for example, where you weren't really part of it, but you kind of get lumped in on one side or the other.
yeah, so, I basically had to support them at that point, because if I didn't, then we were all going to lose and just be ripped apart. And everyone could see the situation, right? Everyone knew that it was, the coalitions were set, here were the sides, and we lost a war, and we're going to lose the next one, okay? So that was the situation between the sessions. And the next session, everyone thought we were just going to lose, so we'll end the campaign. GG, it's over, right? That's what everyone decided. But what happened in reality is I was talking with Chad. Chad was the USA, and I was already in war with the UK. I was in war with Japan, and he hadn't joined yet, I don't think. And he said, don't tell anyone, but once the war is going and UK is fully committed, I'm going to come in the other side and, basically rip apart the coalitions. But we never got to that point because the perception was that the coalitions were not going anywhere, because that's been the experience of everyone, is that once these coalitions form, nothing happens. And he was expected to come in on their side, and everyone expected him to. And because of that, everyone voted to start the new game. So it was just like the game ended directly as a consequence of the coalitions, right?
People need to be more, in a historical example, need to be more like Italy in World War II, or in World War One. Sorry.
Did you see what you weren't there. Did you see what I did in the previous Tuesday game? TJ, you were there, right?
I was only there for like half a session as Ottomans.
Oh, okay. Oh, I ended
Doc
up...
is cancerous. Oh yeah, he rage quit that game, by the way.
Not that one.
Yeah, the Tuesday game.
The previous one. The one before this one. I was playing Italy. And,
No, there's another one he was playing as Germany, he rage quit that one. Oh, was this a different one?
was that?
Doc's rage quit so many games.
You might have rage quit that one too, now that you mention it. But I was
He
playing
was
it.
playing as Russia, he rage quit because Gurren did something.
I was playing Italy, and 570 was France. And he was really trying to get me to come in on his side, right? But I'd already had this idea that the coalitions were the problem, so I wasn't going to commit to anything. And what happened was, the last session of the game, there was this huge war. And it was, I think, France and Spain and UK, I think. I don't remember which side UK was on. Basically, it was this giant war where everyone was involved except for me. I was not involved. And then while the war was going on, I declared war on the Ottomans. The Ottomans were in the war. And I had a separate mini-war against the Ottomans, and I won. And I took Bosnia off of them. And then I turned around and I joined the other side in the war. And my joining the other side tipped the scales, and then that side won, the other side surrendered. So, as an outside observer, I essentially dictated the course of the war, right? But it wasn't because I picked a side from the beginning and threw everything into it. It was because I saw the way things were going. And you're right, that was Gok. Because he was playing Germany, and he was doing fantastically well against everyone. But because of how well he was doing, I ended up joining the other side to balance it out. And that's sort of the moral of the story, I guess. Is
yeah, so you did that's what I was saying. We need more players that do that let conflict sort of brew.
yeah.
And then if it's fairly obvious to maintain balance of power, they swap sides back and
But you can't.
They swap
Well,
sides.
I mean, that also makes people not trust you as well. Like, if you're just flip-flopping, people aren't going to really want to make deals with you if you're just always willing to betray them at a moment's notice.
Well, one of
And
my.
that won't really work in Victoria too, where people are required to hold treaties outside of sessions. It might work in.
Oh, that actually brings me to a really great point.
Treaties are absurd. They need to just die, be burned in the seventh ring of hell with lawyers and politicians.
There's a player of Vincino who, for a long time, I just really didn't like playing with him or against him, because not only is he a great player, but he just had no respect for sort of in between diplomacy or anything like that between sessions. But I've gotten sort of a new appreciation for his approach, because I mean, he can come into a campaign as a sub or whatever, and just with fresh eyes see the situation and approach it as he saw it. And oftentimes that meant that I was on the losing end, but I could say, oh, okay, well, You know, it worked. It worked better for the campaign that way, even if I individually was on the losing end. But not. I don't think the treaties themselves are the problem. I think it's the diplomacy between sessions that's the problem. And I think, as a gentleman's rule, it would really serve people well to not conduct diplomacy between sessions. And here,
How would you get treaties between sessions?
you don't. You don't.
Maybe meet 30 minutes before
Yeah.
the game starts, whatever, to do treaties.
Now hear me out on why. As you have these coalitions form, what happens before the first session of a campaign, right? You have all these
Everybody's
people,
scrambling.
everyone's scrambling, trying to get treaties worked out, you know, trying to basically form the coalitions before the game's even started, right? And then they all come in, and it's day one, everyone's justifying on some random person, and it's like, if you're lucky, you're the first one to finish, and then the giant war starts, and it's like World War I starts in 1837, right? And it's just, it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't have to be that way. But the big problem with it is it benefits the people that put the most time into the intergame diplomacy, which not only tends to be the people that favor the coalitions, but it's also the people that don't need that extra benefit. So the people that need the most benefit are the ones who are the least good at the game, right? So you need to prop up the weakest players. And if you're favoring the people that are already the best players, and they're already putting in all this extra time to make sure that they're going to come out on top, and usually they're throwing the new players under the bus anyway, right? Because they're saying, well, I'm going to trust the guy that knows what he's doing, right? So I'm going to go find the best player I can, Gurin or Chad or whoever. We're going to make a treaty, and then we're going to be friends throughout the entire game. And then all the other new players that come in, well, we're just going to annex them because they're the new players, right? And I think the problem really is the intergame diplomacy. So if you can have a gentleman's agreement and say, limit your diplomacy to 30 minutes before the game starts, then everyone can get together in the Discord and they can still do their diplomacy, but it's not going to be a week's worth of diplomacy or 2 weeks worth of diplomacy where everything's going to be solidified before the game even starts, right? What do you think?
1 second, something off topic. Why are you colonizing like a Lovecraftian like demon?
What are you talking about?
In your colonies, you have Kagina, Kawaka, and then New Chafnulf. It sounds like
I don't know what you're talking about.
Demon of some kind.
He's talking about the names of the provinces.
Oh, that's just automatic. I don't know.
It sounds like you're trying to summon a Cthulhu demon or something.
But Gaku, one problem with what you're saying is, like, your people should be more, like, for lack of a better word, like, accepting towards the newer players. But lots of times the newer players are on the weaker nations. But
That's true.
Your primary suggestion to what happened, to how to fix the coalition problem is something that we sort of agreed would leave the weaker nations behind, right? Like,
I don't
you-
agree.
Like, well,
Not
you even
necessarily.
said it would take Sardinia longer to form Italy, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's necessarily a problem.
But
But that would it would make him weaker in comparison to someone like France, then, correct?
are you streaming this on Twitch, Gaku?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
on
it
Twitch
is.
and YouTube. I think that would happen regardless. And I think, well, let me put it this way. If you have someone that you want to be strong on Sardinia Piedmont, and then you make an alliance and you make sure that they're strong by virtue of the fact that you're helping them the entire game, then of course they're going to be stronger, right?
Yeah.
But
It relies a lot
Sardinia
more on
needs
player
help.
skill, on individual player skill, Gaku, is what he's pointing out. You don't have that big brother to help out the new player. If you
Nobody
do
wants
only
to, like,
a session or 2-session diplomacy.
I'm saying it's
Nobody
not
wants
the
to
new
fight.
player that gets helped out, though. It's always the experienced player at the expense of the new player.
But it's not. But on the smaller nations,
Most of the time, smaller nations are newer players.
Well, no
Yeah.
one's going to help out Chile or Colombia or something, you know?
Well, experienced players don't want to get dragged down by less experienced ones. Like, you don't want to
Yeah.
lose a war because your allies are drooling noob.
Exactly.
So they
But
kind of both cause issues.
yeah. But like for Colombia and stuff, a lot of times the U.S. will go and they'll get them to the point where they can grow by themselves. depending on the U.S. player, in exchange for having a buffer state or having something that can help them guard their mainland if they want to go and fight off a crazy war in Europe. I've been in that situation a couple times because I like playing in South America. It's actually kind of fun.
All right. Let's say you didn't affect that at all. Okay. Let's say you still allowed everyone to ally however they wanted to. Okay. No changes, no limits on alliances. How would limiting diplomacy to 30 minutes before a session change that?
What it would end up doing, the 30 minutes before diplomacy,
Yeah.
would lead to less of
people focusing on more important alliances.
Say that again. What do you mean?
France would focus on Germany, Spain, Britain, rather than Sardinia, and like all the smaller nations.
Is that a problem?
Well, no, because generally speaking, the smaller nations go to the major they want to ally with.
I mean, there's no reason you can't do this in game. You don't have to have a treaty.
That's why I say treaties should just be removed because they're cancerous.
I have several sessions ago. I made a commitment to not involve in any more treaties, just as a rule, because I don't think they contribute anything to the game.
I think they do the exact opposite.
The purpose is to keep people honest and not like deciding to back out of deals.
Well, here's the thing: if you're not honest, then everyone should get together and attack you. But
they should, but they don't always do it.
And whose fault is that?
Because it's not always the best idea to kill someone just because they're dishonest. Jesus, people.
That's true.
Yes.
It's not always the best idea, but if it's
at
such
the
an
same
egregious breach of trust, then maybe you should.
Or just not make treaties with them. That's the other option. Or not make deals with them.
You can't always you can't always rely on that. Sometimes you kind of have no choice.
Well, if you have no choice, you always have a choice whether or not to make a treaty with someone.
Well, if the choice is like die or make a treaty, most people will make a treaty.
Gurren.
But if you remove,
you make more treaties than just about anyone in any game. What is your opinion on limiting diplomacy to 30 minutes before a game?
It would change a lot.
What
I'm not sure if it would be for the better. But
well, what do you think would happen?
There'd be a lot less complex plans. There'd be a lot less.
Is that a bad thing?
Well, yeah, I'm not exactly sure, because like sometimes really complex plans are like really like neat to see like unfold, you know.
Yeah.
But also it could result in like really like cheesy shit. It would probably cut down on cheesy shit happening.
I think that's a good thing personally, cutting down on cheesy shit.
Yeah, Haiti conquering all of South America.
But
I'm so salty about that, girl.
But you have to make sure that the people are actually like available. That's like the main issue, because like
the
reason that you can make diplomacy throughout like the whole week is that there's so many people who just aren't available that often, so it's like really hard to get a hold of them. You know?
That's another reason why I think 30 minutes before the game is the best time to do it, because it's the one time where in theory everyone could be there.
Well, some people don't even show up until like the time.
Still like 30 minutes after.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people don't even show up on time to begin with.
Well, if you make it known that all diplomacy is going to take place in this window, then if they don't show up, then it's their own fault, right?
Or
maybe
like
you might have to start the game
session,
like a little bit later though. I don't know.
The very first session, you would just start at the same time as you would all the later sessions, but just have the first 30 minutes be the diplomacy time.
Now, if you flip it around, though, if you have these, again, I'm gonna come in on the side of the new players, which might not be as experienced, and not only are they not going to have any idea what the treaties are about, but they're probably not going to enter into them or go out of their way to find them, right? So if you have this window where everyone knows this is the time for diplomacy, then you get everyone, including the experienced players and the new players, they can break off into their groups, they can come to agreements, whether that's in a treaty or not, but it puts everyone on the same level playing field, right?
Yeah, it sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I would even maybe have it the first session just people get in the lobby while you conduct diplomacy. And allow diplomacy to be conducted not just in the first 30 minutes of the game, but the first 30 minutes before the game and until the session ends.
Oh, of course you can do it during the session.
You need like a bunch of rooms for this sort of thing.
Yeah, right.
Well, like, you'd need to have like 5 or 6 diplomacy rooms.
I mean, this isn't for any one campaign. This is just sort of like general guidelines we're trying to come up with here. But yeah, I mean, the idea is more the window rather than the specifics, I think. And even if you don't have treaties in a campaign, I still think this is a good idea. Because
something to keep in mind though is that it might actually be it might actually be easier to get people to sign shit if there's a short, like if they don't have long to think about something. Like let's say the day after a session, I want to make a treaty with someone, but they're like, I don't know, I'll just wait and see like if I can talk to somebody before the end of the week or whatever.
that's
But if they
true.
don't have like that long time to think about it, like people would probably end up making a lot of deals that they normally would.
But would that limit things to shorter treaties that are like more concise and practical?
Well, treaties should be short anyways, I think.
It should be, but
Treaties should just be removed.
Or wait, do you mean like actual typed words they should be short? I meant like time-wise they should be short, like 10 years
Time.
or to 30 years.
I'm talking about like rather than a whole legal document to oversee the transfer of one province or something. It should be something that's appropriate for the amount of diplomatic action or activity that's being overseen, right?
You can limit treaties to like predetermined terms if you want to make it that way. It'd make it a lot easier, I think.
See, I've been really tempted before just to hire just to send a treaty you've written me, and just a lawyer to see what they think it says.
Wow.
And
It's like a
they'd be
degree
like,
in law
wait,
or
what does
something.
any of the, like, what the fuck's infamy? Why are people throwing around millions if they break a treaty? Oh, wait, this money's worthless? Then why is it even in the treaty?
Okay, so I wanted to pull in a couple more things from the chat. Flame says you could just make specific alliance rules for the top 8 countries. And I wanted to mention that we tried this in the Sunday game in Mayo, and it really limited the counter alliances, and it had sort of the same problems because
like you're not always gonna have the same top 8. They're gonna change over time.
well, it was the top 4 that were limited, and even that was just a huge problem because there are only like 8 or 10 players, so it meant that 4 of the players could never ally each other, and
Essentially, it meant that Gaku couldn't be. Is this the same Sendemia where you own like Germany, where you did what's the plan where Germany takes over Poland and kills all the Poles?
no, this is a different one.
This is a different one where he was England.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
it was that same
interested in
campaign.
I'm interested in what Gurren thinks about not taking 100% land in wars.
For Victoria 2, it like very rarely happens because the bullshit's gender rules. I think so. I think there needs to be like
Well,
less
no, what
surrender
we're
abuse though.
like
So
what the thing was, we were saying people should be more willing to accept losses, and people should also be more willing to not take 100% land.
If you're ever like gonna suggest things about like how people should feel, it's like never actually going to work. So you just always need to not
It's
even
not a
bother
rule,
thinking
it's more of a guideline.
Yeah, we're
about it.
kind
I mean,
of setting
I guess,
guidelines.
but
I think something that would kind of help with that is that what I've seen a lot of the time is that people have this sort of mindset where it's like, I'm going to min-max the whole way through, and if maybe I want to have a little fun on the side, I'm going to roleplay a little bit. But I feel like people would have, like a lot of these problems would kind of go away if people sort of took the mindset like, okay, I'm going to roleplay as this country, and then I'm gonna min-max within what this country would roleplay as, more so, where it's not like, oh, I'm France, I'm just gonna conquer all of Iberia just because I can, but it's more like, I'm France, I'm gonna conquer Aragon because that was the historical thing, and then I'm gonna go fight with Germany for the rest of
You
the
mean
game.
I'm France? I'm not going to attack Spain and annex any of their land at all?
no, I don't
No,
believe
like-
any of this is like a good idea. Countries should only like when you're role playing a country, right? If a country could feasibly if France could feasibly take over all of Iberia, I don't see why they wouldn't, right? Like, I don't know why you should limit yourself, like railroad yourself to history. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, not like railroad yourself to history, right? But like, okay, so, like in the last Meow game that I played in, right? Me and the other Italy player, we basically role played that we were gonna like resurrect the Italian kingdom or whatever, right? And then we were going to be like the Roman Empire the whole time, and that was our thing. We were getting strong sort of as being these little buddies over like some little nonsense, and then we ran around pretending to be crusaders or whatnot. You know, we didn't run up and go like just cut Gaku out of Austria immediately, just because we probably could have done, because we were Italy and we had 10 Gorillion ducats all the time, you know?
I mean, that's more of like a playstyle thing.
Well, that's what
I'm saying.
that's what we're getting at is.
I mean, you can't like fundamentally make someone want to roleplay.
No, but a lot of the problems, in my opinion at least, with the multiplayer in general, is the way people approach the games. And I think a lot of people just don't realize the way that they're approaching the games. Like, maybe they're fully aware, but I think a lot of people just never really thought it through. So the idea is to come up with like a set of guidelines where if you think it through and you think this would be a better way to play, then you can change the way you play. And as far as what you were saying with the role-playing, that was another thing I was thinking about just this morning, which is role-players have a really bad reputation, and in some ways rightly so, because a lot of role-players tend to not be as effective at running their countries. Sometimes it's because they're role-playing, and sometimes just because they're not good at min-maxing, right? And sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. But I think a lot of people, and myself included, it's easy to take advantage of someone who's role-playing. Because if you min-max and someone else is role-playing, then you're going to come out on top and they're going to probably rage quit, right?
Yeah.
So I think, as sort of a general guideline, you could say, don't min-max against the person who's role-playing. Does that make sense?
Well, in terms of the coalition problem itself, maybe not running individual countries, but I think role-playing fixes the coalition problem itself if everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, it could.
Because, like, if you're role-playing how countries acted, these coalitions didn't really form in real life unless there was something. There was something to stop.
They didn't form until World War One.
No. Like, you see, like when EU4 used to have all these crazy start dates, those were all the times when there were big coalitions, right?
Yep.
It was like everybody in Europe fighting Spain and Austria because they united under one king or whatever, you know? Like,
yes, but it's not like, but it wasn't like
coalitions formed for very specific reasons. They didn't form
like they didn't form as a nature of how the game progressed, or obviously in real life it wasn't forming as the natural progression of what states will do. If you were looking at EU4 or Iki2 multiplayers as if they were a history, it would seem like consolidating and forming coalitions is the natural progression of what a state should do to be powerful. But that wasn't true in real life. You didn't want to tie yourself and commit to other people necessarily. And maybe that might have happened had immortal god kings been leading every nation. But you kind of have to keep in mind, diplomacy was a lot of just person-to-person communication, which might be possible over 400 years in a game, but in real life, like, a new king could tear apart an alliance.
Instant voice communication instead of carrier pigeons for 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Like, even World War One mostly like in the like dying days, like just before it happened, it pretty much just happened because people were sending telegram messages back and forth, and that takes forever to translate between like German and Russian, you know? You can't really have diplomatic envoys doing that, like, as you're, you know, mobilizing your 10 million strong armies.
So, Gurren, as far as what you're saying, I agree with you that, you know, it's impossible to say this is how you should play and enforce it. But I do think there's this sort of golden rule approach, which is where you can say if in general players agree to abide by these guidelines, and if you're the person that's gonna, you know, flaunt it and say I'm not gonna do it and therefore I'm gonna be the better player, well, then that's a situation where the players can get together and say, well, we don't accept that you're going to do this, therefore we're going to use your own flaunting of the guidelines against you. Does that make sense? So as an example, if there's an idea that you should be satisfied if you lose a war, and if you don't lose a 100 war score because people aren't min-maxing against you, and then you in turn aren't min-maxing against other people, so you're not taking a 100 war score. But then if someone comes in and takes a 100 war score against you, well, now they've broken that convention. So now it's okay for other people to break the convention against them.
The problem with this, Gaku, is that you're very quickly going to run into situations where it's like one side gets really mad at the other side, so they break it, and then you just have a coalition of both people breaking whatever conventions there.
Possibly.
And it takes one person mess up to break the whole. That's
Yeah,
why you
like-
have to put in a
Like
rule.
one
You can only
person will
take-
mess it up, and then like what I think is you should try coming up with actual rules that will like encourage the sort of behavior that you actually want, right?
But the
If you
thing,
can like do that, it'd be like much more
but
useful.
Gaku, the thing, or not Gaku, Gurren, the thing is, I already told Gaku this, he doesn't agree, but I don't think you can come up with rules
Yeah, I don't think so.
that will get rid of the coalition problem as a whole.
People are always exploit the rules to their advantage.
Like, people will always try and get around the rules.
And here's the other thing, is that a lot of these things that players do are the optimum thing to do. And what I'm in some cases asking people to do is to not do the optimum thing. Not because it's better for them individually, but because I think it's better for the game as a whole. And that includes coalitions, because coalitions make sense, and they do help the people who are in them on both sides. Otherwise they wouldn't form. And they do work. They work as intended. They just unfortunately speed the destruction of games.
The only problem with coalitions, I think, is when I don't think normally there's a problem with coalitions, but only when there is people who will be in a coalition for no gain of their own. I think if you're actually looking out for your own country, and you're actually gaining from the coalition, it's like understandable. But the really big problem happens when you have like 3 people on a side that aren't actually getting anything, and they're just like following along.
That certainly makes things worse, but I don't think it's the only problem.
But I mean, like, for example, in his video, like, the France, Milan, Portugal, theoretically, those 3 nations, Portugal and France really have no business allying, because France can just beat up Castile. The only reason for Portugal, or for that to be in that, is for Portugal's gain. France really doesn't gain anything. Like, Portugal,
They gain an ally versus an enemy that can ally someone. And
Yeah, they gain not having an enemy.
yeah, but
which is often what happens. If you
Well, but I
have
mean-
to ally because the
Portugal
alliance,
and France are never really enemies, though, unless Portugal
Well,
has.
Portugal-
but
expanded
if
into
Portugal
Spain.
wants Spanish land, he's going to attack at the same time France does.
If
He's
Por-
not going to, I want Spanish land, therefore I am going to either ally France or ally Castile. No, if he wants Spanish land, he's going to make use of the France attacking Spain.
It's like Spain in Victoria 2 always goes with France. There's like no exception to that, right? It's the same thing that would happen in Mayo
But
if
that's to stop him from dying.
Sometimes Spain goes with NGF. I'm not saying that's
Almost
necessarily the right
never.
thing to do, I'm just saying that they do it sometimes.
that
oh
is
yeah,
so
there's an
rare.
exception to every rule.
We're talking about Victoria too.
Or-
It necessarily goes on any side like all that much.
I think
Like,
they're more
compared to the-
neutral.
Yeah, they can go like either way.
They're just not going to go against France, not necessarily help them.
Which means they're on France's side if they're not going against them and they want to do something in a
Well-
major war.
Well, they're basically an island, right? So I mean,
Yeah,
It's the same situation with Portugal and in Mayo is what I'm saying. Even if they don't actively help France, you know?
They
Yeah, I
don't
think-
actively
Alright.
help France. They can't work against them without great risk, so they may as well be allied and help France to have something fun to do for the whole game besides colonizing.
We got a few more things to read here. So David says the real problem is the lack of Italian politics mentality. This is the mentality of the balance of power. If a coalition is strengthening, all the other neighboring coalitions need to ally together. Another problem he finds is the total war problem, where players only go to war with other players if they think they can get 100%, and if they think it's going to be one-sided. So wars are usually massive, total war mode, 100% peace deals, and rare. Which I agree with, that last part.
See, I can't tell if my internet's pooping or if it's Twitch that's crapping out.
At least in EU4, the way I see it is always it is always 100% or stab hit, or stab hitting at 50. There is no in between. You're either stab hitting at 50 or taking 100.
Yes, there's no
What?
leave a player alive. It's kill a player, do as much damage as you can, so you can kill them easier next time.
What do you mean stab?
EU4 has a mechanic where once you get 50% war score, if you demand less than half of your war score and they decline, they lose 1 stability.
Victoria 2 has it as well, but it's not used very often. As often.
That's because
It's not as
we made it
useful.
allowed because they're casuals. Okay, but to fix this, you can just like edit the surrender rule. It's like a very simple fix. Like you can have it more like Ison's Sunday Victoria 2 game, where like you declare for your goals at the start and then like blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like if they surrender.
But
you can
in
get them.
EU4 that doesn't really work as well because it's taking it's a lot.
No, actually, it actually works really well because let's say I declare for like 2 provinces, right? Then if I surrender, I know I'm only going to lose like 2 provinces.
That's a really good idea, I think.
Yeah.
There's
Just
a lot more
Or
provinces
say you're going to
EU4
take.
though.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but
But
like,
Gurren,
but both sides
that's-
feel okayish with surrendering because they're only losing 2 provinces. Like if that works.
Maybe declare for states or something. Your hope is to take
you could.
X state, but the
That's
problem
just
is
as long as you
that
declare it.
calculating for war is very. It's a lot harder to do in EU.
You can see war score on the provinces.
Yeah.
In Victoria 2, you can't even see the war score costs. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
When you justify a war, you click on it, it shows you, and you can sit there and you can. It's.
Okay, but in Mayo it doesn't take account infrastructure.
And then
It just takes
Yeah.
account population, immediate population.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does. It takes into account the total population of the province, and then it's
No,
based on
but
the
when you look at the
size
total
of the
war score,
province.
when you look at the war score cost of the province, it tells you the accurate one.
That's still not relevant though, because then even if it was inaccurate, let's say it costed more, right? That just means that that the other person can add 100 and you can add 100. It's like that's all it ends up meaning.
I mean,
you ask
really,
for that
what you
much.
could do to make it just simpler would be you can declare war for whatever, and you can only take up to X percentage if you when attacking. If they instantly surrender, they can only lose up to X. Otherwise, whenever they surrender, the percentage that you're at, you pause the game and you peace out for that percentage. You
I
can't.
no percentage actually gained in war is like a terrible metric.
Well,
Just
it,
like-
Works much better in
For
EU
example,
than Vicky.
Like, no, like, last resort. I can be whole-handedly winning a war in EU4 and have 1% war score. Just
yeah,
because
like it's just always retarded to use that as an actual metric.
but yeah, I do like that idea of basically porting over the Victoria 2 surrender rules, which is like, you know, declare war for exactly what you're state exactly what you're declaring for. If they surrender it, and if not, then at least in the Filthy Casuals rules, then you would have to declare every new addition on top of that, so it's not just, oh, you surrendered, now by the way we're adding 100%. So
Streamer mode is enabled. Stay safe, friends.
It might
Is that
not
what
actually.
popped up?
it did.
Gaku, it might not
Yeah.
be bad to even make it so that you can't add any more war goals, if you know what I mean. Like just having, or maybe if more people joined, there could be more goals. But like, if it's just a 1v1 situation,
Yeah.
and you declared for your goals at the start, I don't know if you even necessarily have to allow adding of more goals.
Well, I don't know if you remember the way we did things, which I remember you didn't like, but the idea is every time you add a new goal, whatever that happens to be, you have to pause and state it. So, as an example, if you declared for 2 provinces, that would just be the declaration. I declare for 2 provinces. If you add a third one, then you would have to, you know, pause it and make it clear. If you surrender from this point forward, you're going to be losing 3 provinces. And then the person gets to think, oh, do I want to keep fighting or do I want to let them keep adding war goals, you know?
And no, one thing is, especially in Mayo, where provinces can have vastly different war score costs
Yeah.
because there's no cap. Like, how would, theoretically, couldn't Byzantium just say, okay, I'm declaring war on the Ottoman player for this one province that's
Yeah.
like 1% war score,
Sure.
and then the Ottomans not be able to take anything, or then the Ottomans just say, okay, you can't be, or theoretically Byzantium can win, but then he wins and he's like, okay, I'm taking Constantinople, something like that.
No, you'd have to declare which province.
But yes, but what I'm saying is, say
There's
Say
other
you
goals
declare
other than
for-
land, though, right? Like,
Yes,
Yeah,
you're
sure.
declaring for a 1% war score province to stop them from being able to declare on you. That's what I'm saying.
yeah, that's a thing that can happen. It can happen in Victoria too. It just hasn't actually happened that much. Because
I'm
But
not
I feel
quite
like in
sure
something
what
like
you're.
Mayo and taxes, that could be a lot bigger problem, and then you just instantly surrender.
I'm
you
still
can
not
have a
quite
minimum war
following you.
score. You can have a minimum war score cost on what you can declare war for. If that's really worrying for you. Like
Are
you
you-
can say like you have to at least declare war for 10% war score or something.
What's the problem
Or you-
exactly?
He's saying,
Sugaku, the problem is like if I know that I'm about to get attacked by the Ottomans, right? I know I'm about to get wrecked by the Ottomans, so
Okay.
instead I'm going to declare war on them on a 1% war score province, and then I'm going to instantly surrender because instantly surrendering is the most OP bullshit in the universe. And
Oh,
then they won't be able to add anything because I've only declared for 1% province.
well, that's assuming the what I guess the Sunday game rules, which is not the FC rules. FC rules is if you get declared on, you get to add one war goal in return. So
And then
if
those
they
war goals, but what I'm saying is, would it be based on like number of provinces, war score, like what? Like if you declare for 2 provinces that are 25, can they take 2 provinces that are 50, or would it be like?
well in the Victoria 2 rules said it would just be one war goal, whatever that happened to be. So
No, in the Victoria 2 actually it's not. It's like approximate worth. So like
yeah.
if it's like Bohemia, it's not going to be equivalent to Croatia, right? It'll be completely different.
It would be an EU, for example, if you don't play live Victoria 2 would be if someone declares war for Constantinople, it's not the equivalent of declaring war for like some crappy Irish province.
Oh.
They're not equivalent. Like if you
Yes,
declare
but
war
what
for
I'm
some
saying
crappy
is, how
province
would
in
you
Ireland,
how would you transfer that war over? Would they be taking 1 province? Would they be taking equivalent war score worth of provinces?
equivalent
I think
war
with the specific province, the province specific point value of war score, it would be very easy to say some equivalent score in provinces or something.
war score within maybe 5%. Make it.
I mean, like, let's say you wanted to completely get around it, right? So you declare a trade war, and then I think the other side can't even demand provinces. So then it's like, okay, well, if you had won the trade war, you would have gotten what, the money plus the trade power plus the war reparations, presumably. So it's like, if that's what you're declaring war, and if you surrendered right away, then the other side would just get that, right? But if you declared war for, say, 50% worth of war score, and then the other side, if you just instantly surrendered, then the other side could add 50% on you. And it might be that the CB might not be favorable. Like I did that to Chubi a while ago, where I was playing Hungary and he was playing the Ottomans. And rather than let him do a reconquest, I declared a conquest on him, you know? It's like, I knew he was going to declare war on me, but I didn't want him to have that CB, so I declared a separate, different war. But, he had the option at least to get it in return. And there was a possibility, too. He could, through diplomacy say, well, okay, we're going to white peace this war. But then in return for that, essentially a treaty, you would have to surrender the next war, which would be an equivalent amount of war score or something, which, that's a possibility, I think.
Why would you ever do that if you declared the... But why would you do that if you declared a trade war to get a truce block them?
Like, you could just then declare another trade war. Or I could say I'm declaring for 1 war score worth of ducats.
Sure.
That might be an interesting way to get, like, less popular war goals to be relevant, so I'm not sure it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because, like, how often do you actually see trade
But
wars
they would,
happen?
but they would only be used for the sake of, cheesing. Yeah.
Not
Maybe.
necessarily.
Well, I
Well-
mean, like, trade war at least can really cuck people over if they're like a merchant republic in EU.
It
But
can
like,
make
the
if,
only
like
reason to
60%
use
of
trade,
your money
Yeah,
is
but the only
from
reason-
trade.
but the only reason to use trade war is if it's the only CB you have. Like,
Well,
why
yeah.
use trade war when I can conquest, take
Well,
10
that's
war
not
score
true.
worth of provinces and still get the money 10 war score reparations and 60 war score
It's safer. That's why
trade
you do it.
power.
I was using, I used one on France in the Sunday game I was in as England, because back before I completely lost naval superiority, it meant that I could get war score just by blockading. And in theory, France wouldn't have been able to turn that around, so I could get a ticking war score without having to, land and you know, occupy
Yeah,
or
but what
anything
can
like
you
that.
do if that taking war scores?
Piss them off.
I mean, maybe we could make like a custom thing where we edited some of the things, like some of the war goals, so that they were a bit more viable.
Maybe, or do a custom mod which had a player war or whatever, which allowed everything to be taken, but you had to declare your war goals, and it could only be used against players.
I mean, okay, let me give you
That
another
would be
scenario though.
fairer. That would make a bit more sense.
So the reason these less common war goals aren't used, right, is because of the coalitions.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward, because like if you go to war in this giant coalition war, are you going to go in giant coalition war to get some more reparations? No. Are you going to do that for trade power? No. But if, like I mentioned, if you let the relatively fair 1v1 play out, then it doesn't have to be half the world versus the other half of the world for, you know, less than 100%.
No, but are you going to fight over that and risk one of your nations being beaten up really badly, and then
I don't know,
a
are
third
you?
party coming in declaring war on you and kicking your butt?
And remember,
Is it
it's
really
Mayo.
worth it for that
If
CD?
if I declare a trade war on someone and win, it's Mayo. Their nation is still destroyed.
Maybe.
If I go occupy them,
David,
that's a fact.
David just put a really good idea in the Discord. He says the looting, if you tie looting to aggressive expansion, then if you turn on high looting and go loot someone, you're going to have a giant coalition on you, which I think is a great idea.
Yeah.
But to win a war, you have to accidentally loot, and it gives negative modifiers. You should also make the looting skill not give modifiers to your army if you're going to do it that way.
No,
What do you mean?
that's fine. The
Well,
looting
no, because then it
thing
makes
works
you.
fine.
Well, no, because
Well, my
you
problem
can...
with does looting scare happen if you use normal looting and not higher?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think it can. You just
It
have
does,
to loot
but
a
it's
lot of money.
It's
Yeah,
not
since
as
I think
much,
it's based
yeah.
on the amount of money you loot, not
Mhm.
how.
Well, yes, but if you siege down somebody at 100% war score, you could get looting scare, not trying to purposely burn down their nation, and get a bunch of extra AE that you don't want to get.
So, I
That's
mean,
what I said. You should be able to. You should remove the modifiers, not the looting scare. It should still be based off money, but you should remove the modifiers for going to strongly restricting looting versus loot as much as you want,
so you,
because that
Oh,
should
you
really
mean
determine the risk of AE.
Wait, hold on, last resort. So clarify. Do you mean when you click heavily restrict looting, you get
Like
plus
the-
5% discipline
He
versus
means get rid
when
of
you
that.
have 10 Gorillion ducats, you lose a ton of modifiers to your army? Which one of those do you
Yeah,
mean? The
both.
discipline?
Just
I think-
remove all modifiers like that.
He means
So
discipline.
that, yeah,
Or it
and
should
then,
be there, though.
and then whatever looting you pick, you just get AE equal to the amount of loot you take. Have that
But
event.
the
fire
modifiers
more,
make
so you get a
sense,
bunch
though.
But it's to simulate the effect on your army, which makes sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
but then if you're gonna tie a bunch of AE to it, since you're gonna
No,
accidentally
no,
loot,
have
that
to
doesn't
occupy.
matter. That doesn't matter.
you,
You already have to occupy stuff.
yes, but if you restrict looting to prevent AE, it makes it to where you don't get you're forced to take a certain modifier on your army to prevent AE.
Yeah.
Which you shouldn't really be forced to do, which isn't a mechanic that they kind of have in the
Oh,
base
okay.
game, and it's balanced around that.
Yeah.
That's why I say remove that if you're going to add AE for heavy looting, so that you don't
Yeah.
have to burn down land and accidentally get aggressive expansion because you want to take a bunch of land off someone. Like say Morocco, for example. I want to take a bunch of land off of them, and I don't want to loot them down. But if I'm on normal looting or whatever, I would get enough gold just taking their forts to get the war score to take 100% off of them, to where my AE would be to where I couldn't take 10% off of them, depending on how hard you buffed it. That's not really.
I'm not really
Fair.
following you there.
Yeah.
I think so. Like something that could help prevent the whole, at least in Meow, right, where you walk into somebody's country and before you can peace out for like, you know, you might want 3 provinces, but they have so much population that those 3 provinces are worth 100% war score,
Yep.
right? Even though those 3 provinces are like 3 out of 40,
Yep.
right? So like, to prevent somebody from having to go through and like full loot a country to get the war score to take these 3 large provinces, right? What you could maybe do is, at least between players, you could have it where if somebody takes the provinces. So like, let's say Spain declares war for France, and they want like 3 provinces along the border. They take the 3 provinces along the border, and if the war continues, and Spain can't like it's sort of like unofficial war dynamism, right? Where like if Spain can't unsiege them, the war just has to end.
Sort of.
Like
So,
the
like,
provinces
Sounds
split.
like the stalemate rules they use in Sunday Vig.
Well, one thing is, I think, like, EU4's, like, I don't know how to compare it to Vic, but in EU4, it is not necessarily your highest priority to stop your land from being sieged. When you could be doing things like chasing around the enemy army and trying to stack wipe it, then you have the ability to full siege them, stuff like that. Or what if you're in 2 wars at once? You're going to choose one to focus over the other.
Yep.
So to enforce stalemate on that, when theoretically, if I'm ignoring Spain for say 2 years because I know I have a line of forts, but then they occupy the war goal, which is on the border, it forces me to focus on both wars, or I'm guaranteed one of them. Instead of relying on your forts to stall one war while fighting the other, it forces you to go attack the other one, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing.
No,
Yeah, I don't
but
think it's
I'm
a
trying
great
to point
idea.
out
But like in
that-
history, right? Like when, I think this happened, especially in like the Middle East, right? Like the Roman Empire might come in and they would occupy Iraq, but because like Persia can't retake Iraq from the Romans, it's de facto under Roman control, right? And then they just sign a peace deal. You know?
Yes, they sign a peace deal.
Well,
It's
but
not
like what I'm
like-
saying is, no player is going to just give up, right? And you guys were saying that you want to prevent somebody from, you know, giving up all of the war score. So like, if after a certain amount of time, right, somebody can't retake their forts, because in the certain amount of time, the other player will just keep walking through your land, looting the whole place and ravaging.
adding a surrender, adding
That's-
a
that's
surrender
just
like the
mechanic
stalemate
where they
rules.
have to peace out
Okay,
would
with
be better. Adding a
tickers.
mechanic where they have to peace out would be.
Well, I might be wrong,
With
but in
tickers-
Vicky 2, ignoring a front line is not really a thing. You can't
No.
ignore, like, that's not really a thing. That is a thing in EU4. You can just ignore people and let your forts deal with them while you have something else. You can't ignore people in Vicky 2.
Okay, but
Yeah,
it
that's
That's
takes
why I think it's a bit different.
it takes a minimum of 50 months to max out your war score, and that's a reasonable amount. I mean, that's like over 4 years, right? So if you just let someone sit on the CB, I guess.
4 years and 4 months.
Yeah, like how normally if you full siege an AI, right, it'll just flip to
40 months
100%
is
after
under
5
4
years.
Kaku.
Yeah,
It's 3 years.
Sort
and
of
4
like
months.
that, but for
What?
the war goal.
that's 12 months. 48 plus 2. It's 4 years.
Oh wait, 50. Sorry, I can't.
So
Well, the mechanic you're talking about is
Oh,
if you
50 months,
if
yeah.
you fully occupy someone,
yeah,
for
Okay, yeah,
I
I'm
think,
saying
yeah,
that,
fully
but
occupy
like
someone
put it for
10
the war
years
goal.
and
That's
have
when
none
it's
of your
fine.
land be occupied, it will then force the war to be at 100% regardless of their allies.
I mean, if
Which,
you
once again, I think is a bit different than just occupying the war goal.
is it unreasonable to call that a win if someone occupies a province for 4 years and 2 months? I mean, that's
Years
like
are pretty short in EU4.
Yeah.
it can be, yeah, I guess.
And high-level forts can themselves take years to siege.
True.
In
Yeah.
Victoria 2, it's like they were doing like 3 years with it being occupied, which is a third of the session.
Hmm.
So like 10 years might be fine.
Yeah, 10
I
years.
mean, no one's
would
gonna
make
really
it more.
keep track of that. I don't think. I mean, they might, but
Well, and they can't complain. The war goes on forever.
Well, in Vic 2 wasn't it? I thought it was like 1 year. If you occupy something for a year and they do nothing to fix the problem, they can't do
yeah,
anything.
in
Oh,
theory.
that was,
Then
yeah,
you have
that
to
was,
peace
that was
out.
the other part. Is that as long as they're actually like attempting to do something to get it back. Like if
Yeah.
you want to do it that way, then yeah, you can make it be pretty short.
I
I
mean,
think
that,
attempts actually have to have a chance of success as well.
really, I
A
think the
better way
solution
to
to that
say
is still
war
to
would
accept
be-
less than 100% war score. Because if you say, oh,
Yeah.
well, okay, you occupied this one province, I guess I'll lose this one province, and then it's not the end of the world. But if you occupy this one province, I'm going to lose half my country now, then it's a problem.
Well, no, Gaku, it should be, the surrender mechanic should still be a thing.
Maybe
The
we could
surrender
do
mechanic
something like-
fixes a lot of the issues in EU4 that it doesn't quite fix in Victoria 2, because in EU4 you can, somebody day one declares war on you, where if you're in the middle of a war with someone else, it's not quite, if they don't declare for a whole lot, you can instant surrender and still keep fighting your other war and not have as huge of penalties as you have in Victoria, unless I'm very wrong. There's certain, Victoria's very mechanically, wars are very different in EU than in Victoria too.
You can do that in Victoria as well.
But you can't just say focus one front in Victoria 2 and ignore another front entirely.
You can sometimes.
Well, you can, yeah, I feel like Russia, you can ignore Japan for a long time.
No, but like for
Yeah.
example, say in a
But it's
situation where France is at war with
Austria and Spain.
like imagine Germany existed in EU4, where in Vicky 2, if France is at war with Spain and Germany, France has to put troops on Spain's border, while the majority of them are on Germany's border.
Not
Whereas in
necessarily.
EU4, I could put you could put a couple layers of forts and literally ignore Spain for upwards of 20 years, if you have high level forts.
Yeah, forts are pretty strong.
Whereas if it's like, oh, they occupy the war goal for 5 years, then what is the point of anything past the first layer of forts?
I do think that I think that declaring for goals would solve a lot of these problems, though, as a rule. Because if you have to declare for the limited goals, then that's the big problem with surrendering now. Because if you surrender, you're guaranteed to lose 100%. You don't know what that 100% is, so you can never surrender. But if the rule is that they have to declare and state what they're declaring for exactly,
Yeah.
and then you have the option of surrendering to it, or even, coming to terms then, like day one, you could do that. But that would, I think, limit a lot of the nonsense that we've seen.
Colonial wars, for example, are something that may get used a lot more in that case.
Yeah,
Because
I
when
agree
you-
Yeah.
with surrendering. I don't necessarily agree with the enforcing a stalemate, because, like...
Yeah, I don't know
like
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something else. that we-
EU4
I don't
is
think
just
it's
so dynamically
necessary.
different.
Yeah. I don't really think it's necessary. Plus, in this time scale, there were these giant wars that dragged on forever, so, I mean, it's not
Like,
unreasonable.
Like
there were
the 30
periods
Years
of-
War, the 100. They
Gaku,
just got
What's
so
up?
uncreative they just listed them wrong.
I have an idea for
What?
for coalitions to fix them.
Okay.
Okay, so you make a spreadsheet. You have all the countries on the spreadsheet,
Uh-huh.
and then you have modifiers for each country that represent their ideas, right? That they're like special ideas, and then you have development will be the thing that goes into the modifiers,
Okay.
and then you can do like a coefficient sort of system that way. I think that would be updating like every session.
Then Gaku touched on this when he talked about people just trying to min-max, like getting 100% of the coefficient.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. But since it changes every session, though, it's actually like not as because like the whole thing with the Victoria 2 thing is that your coefficient would always stay the same, so you knew that you could keep this guy allied. Like for the
Sure.
whole game, right?
And in EU... But
I
the thing
think
is,
it encourages
like,
a different kind of problem if we were to do
EU4,
that.
there's just so many various modifiers to, like theoretically...
Yeah, how do you compare morale of armies to?
Well, no,
like,
no,
less
like
aggressive
just on
expansion?
population. Like, there are of course the 3 different types of population that do all different things. But then like even so, like like what's it called?
Corruption,
Russia's
centralization.
say if Russia has his 2,000 population and France has his 2,000 population. France's 2,000 population is going to be significantly more effective because it will be concentrated and all at low autonomy.
That's why you can
Whereas-
have modifiers, like I was saying. Like Russia would
But-
obviously have a worse modifier to represent that they're
Like
worse.
autonomy adjusted modifiers.
Yes, but EU4 has
Like
no
possibly
quick way to
use the
check
great-
the autonomy
the great-
adjusted
the great power
development,
rating.
does it?
I
The great
wouldn't
power
say to
rating.
go
That
autonomy.
is exactly what the great power rating is.
I wouldn't say
No,
just do
No,
it.
that's not true.
No, that's
it's
that's
autonomy
based on
modified
tech.
It doesn't take
development.
autonomy.
No, it's tech cost modified development.
You're
Oh, it
thinking.
is autonomy modified
No, it's
development.
You're
not.
thinking of
Plus, that
institution
original-
cost, which is different. Institution
no,
cost is
no,
autonomy
seriously,
modified.
The development it shows is autonomy modified.
No,
the same
it's
as
not.
No,
autonomy.
it's not.
No, it's
It's
not.
not last resort.
It is not autonomy modified.
It's not.
It is.
You can
It's population. and
literally just
technology
open your
Earth
compare the
institution
numbers on the country screen. It's not.
Okay, so I like where we're going so far. What's the solution to rage quitting?
You ban it.
Attitude.
Get good.
Ban them.
Like it's just the attitude of the
So
players.
like 3 strikes you're out. What? I mean, people.
You could do what Slazer did, where like they gave him like a what was it, like a 2-month ban, or they're just banned until like the next. Are you banned from the next game, and then like the game after that you can do anything?
But
Well,
at
someone
what
was saying.
point is a rage quit qualified? Like, cause Slazer banned me from like from a game because I quit at a point when I was Brazil and
Listen,
I had the Amazons in my
He
capital.
didn't ban
left.
you for quitting. Okay, he banned you because your last year's been okay. I'm sorry to tell you this.
Yeah, but still, that's the example of it. He did ban me for that.
So
Cause
maybe
Slazer hates my guts
slightly
because he's
separate
stupid.
from games. Yeah, but you need to draw a line between when's acceptable to rage quit and when isn't it.
And
But the
that's,
thing is, if instead of rage, but people are either going to make excuses, like, oh hey, I have family stuff to do, or they'll just AFK in the session if they're forced to stay in the game.
Well, with Slazer, he didn't even make distinctions between rage quitting and just leaving. I think, like, if he just didn't show up for like 3 sessions, like, you just considered like to be a quitter. I think.
Yeah. That's same in effect.
Yeah.
I mean, if you
know,
don't
that's
have a
gonna need to
sub
be
or something,
Like, if you AFK in League, like, you get banned. So I mean, like, come on, step it up.
but I mean, part
This is-
of the guidelines we're working on is like to make people less likely to rage quit, but also there are people who, you know, they get declared on and they leave. I've seen that several times now. What do you do about
To
that?
get people to surrender less is like a lot harder. I'll think about it.
make war.
Well, no, I think surrendering more would be better because like fighting a war that you.
He's talking
that's-
about the
you're
amount.
Yeah.
I think what we've done with the declaration of war goals will make it easier to surrender.
Yeah.
Because the biggest
think so,
problem
yeah.
with surrendering in EU is that, well, you can declare war for some random province really close to you and take, like, constant. For example, say Austria declares war on the Ottomans, and Ottoman says something in Italy. Well, they can declare war for something in Italy and take Constantinople. You don't
Yeah.
know what they're taking because there's so much that can be done with 100% war score in so many
No.
combinations. By having a way to declare war goals,
Also
it's
limits the wars, which yeah.
So Gaku, what about permanent revanchism?
I like the
oh,
idea.
I still think we should add in the mod every time a player loses a war and they lose more than 10% war score, they should get a plus 100% salt production in their nation.
No, that would be overpowered. And not every nation has salt.
What?
Yeah, what if
Yeah,
you're
they-
playing a country that doesn't have salt production?
Do you
Yeah,
want to lose then?
interesting.
But
That's-
Garen, the thing about permanent revanchism is people would just revanchism is calculated by percent loss, not what you lose. So people would just
You can
humiliate their-
also, well,
like-
okay. But when I say revanchism, I should probably clarify that I mean like however many cores that you're missing, you should be getting like a buff depending on how many cores you're missing. Is kind of what I'm
Isn't
saying.
it Victoria 2 revanchism just
Yeah, like it's
Thing
like
kinda
basically like Victoria 2 revanchism, except it actually does something like beneficial, is what I'm saying.
because Victoria 2 it just gives you more jingoism, which is
Yeah.
useless in most mods because they get rid of jingoism as a.
I've never looked at modding that. I mean,
That'd be a good idea to like give them
Yeah,
like
maybe an
More like
Maybe
what-
revanchism dropped.
how's
well, I
revanchism
think
like war
calculated in
costs or
EU4 though?
It's
it
based on the
gives you
percent lose.
yeah, it's a percent you lose, and then you have that modifier, and it ticks away like it's an opinion modifier or something like that.
So you think it just shouldn't tick
maybe
away?
you can, like,
It
Maybe.
should
If
be-
you wanted to do it that way, you could make it so it doesn't take.
Then-
But the distinction has to be on land, though. I think because I don't think it's like they were saying.
On
People would
cores.
purposely lose. People would purposely lose wars to.
There is a what
get it done.
EU4 does track uncontested cores, because for every
Yep.
uncontested core you lose 0.1 prestige per year. So
Oh, then
Yeah.
just give like a
So-
bonus instead of a. Okay.
so
Yeah,
any
so you
core,
could track that.
yeah.
Whatever that variable is, if you can access it, because I know that prestige is very hard coded, right?
Okay.
So if you can find wherever that variable is, you could track
Uncontested
that.
cores leads to what?
Some sort of buff, maybe
Like
to
tax
your
maybe,
military.
or military.
maybe
Like,
less
you're
It can make
hard
you
to
more
fight.
resistant to war exhaustion.
I've never
less
tried
work
modding
on it,
EU4,
harder to
but
get
we'll have to do some digging, I guess.
In Victoria
Um,
2, you can like give a slight bonus to how your soldiers or promote to soldiers.
So David's got some stuff in the chat here. He said specify what every CB gives. Like in Colonial Conquest, you're not allowed to take non-colonies, or in a conquest, you can only take provinces you have claims on. So I think that would be reasonable, like limiting the CBs to actually what they're, for.
Oh Jesus Christ! That AE. is
On that note,
insane.
what about only for example, if you declare conquest, only taking lands you have claims on, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said.
But if you only do that because of how expensive and how hard claims are to get, in Mio you can't do that. It should be you state what you're going to take whenever you declare. And if you declare a colonial war, you have to state how much colonial land you're going to take. Or up to that amount, or what region or whatever you're trying to take. If you can take it, if it's unreasonable, blah blah blah. That thing.
Well, after the war's been declared, like I was saying, you could add more goals. You would just have to stop and state them as you add them.
Yes, but we shouldn't do it that you can only take the provinces you have claimed. Because of how hard it is, specifically in Mio, to get a claim.
For conquest? Yeah, that makes sense.
For
Yeah,
for
because you
any
can.
war.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah. But even like normally, like only being able to take stuff that you border, like, it just seems kind of.
You should probably add a thing to make
Well,
it
one
less
thing I
exploitive,
see a lot
that
of
you have to take a whole state. Every time you attack, you have to try and fill out states.
One thing
What
that
if-
I don't think will necessarily help the situation as is, but while we're on the conversation of what people are allowed to take, a lot of games banned snaking. What do you guys
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was saying. Make it where you have to try and complete states when you take land.
Well, if you
Try and
can't,
take complete states.
if you have to take land that you have claims on, it would be really, really impractical to do a snake. I mean, you could.
Or
but-
doesn't if you have the third Rome thing, they added in some sort of way to claim an entire state at a time.
That's only for Russia.
I've never seen that, but
Well, yeah,
That-
but can't you
You
mod
could.
that?
I don't know.
You might be able to
Probably,
mod that so that everybody could do it, and
Would
so
that be
that could
useful?
be another form of
One-
claim.
Although one thing is, theoretically, it would be really easy to change how much it costs to take land, but in Mayo, couldn't we do something like, just instead of having your spies get caught at 25, have them get caught at 50?
Well, in Mayo, they're already caught at 40.
No, you get claims at 40. The spies still have a chance of getting caught at 5.
I'm not
You
sure
should
you
probably
mean.
make it to where your spies can only get caught after you can fabricate a claim, so after 40.
Well,
That
but
way
every
it's not
claim,
quite as hard
every
to
claim
do.
increases the cost by 10%, or 10, or 5.
Yes, but you
whichever.
should always be able to get a base claim. If you're going to make it, you can only take claim provinces. That's why I like stating war.
But I
goals.
mean, you would always do that anyways. That's just Meow has a stupid rule.
I wouldn't do conquest only by claims. That I can see being an issue because you can sit there and
Wait, what? That's what you just said.
Yeah,
that's
what's
an
the
issue. I
problem?
wouldn't.
Well, I mean,
It's because it really limits what you can take. And you can fabricate a claim on one province. I would rather you have to state your war goals and it's just by claim. Because fabricating claims are incredibly hard to do, especially in Mio. To sit there and
wait,
get,
wait,
like,
wait, hold on, last resort. You keep using claim as a word, but you have two different meanings between when you're saying it. So you're
No,
saying
claims as in EU claims are very hard to fabricate claims.
no,
They're
I
really
know,
not,
I know
but-
that you said that, okay, but
Okay.
you also just said you have to like claim a war goal and then that
No,
claim.
he said state
is
your war
different.
goal.
State a war goal. I didn't never say
So-
claim a war. I
Well, he said
state a
like
war
you
goal.
have to state a war goal.
Yes, as in like I will take
Okay, yeah.
like for example, like France is like I will take all of the provinces owned by Aquitaine, except he would actually and then they'd count
Yeah.
out the provinces, and then if England happened to win, they would be able to take either equal war score, or equal provinces, however it's decided it would
Yeah.
work. That
It
is
would
what
be
they would
war
do.
score, because equal provinces is very
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
Specifically,
Or I bet you could figure out some way to like maybe in the case of Meow, right? Maybe you could do
Meow.
it based on the infrastructure level in the province instead,
no,
or
just
like
do
some
it based
sort of
No.
modifier with population.
war score would be the way to do that. Again, you shouldn't have
Well,
you can only conquest by things you have physically fabricated as a claim. That should not be a rule.
I think
That
I like.
really makes it.
Because if
I like the
infrastructure
bordering-
is the thing, that would mean Piedmont, which in game has like 90 rural population, would be equivalent to for example, Calais, which in game will have two.
No. I spoke too quick, right? And then Last Resort jumped onto me. I meant like a modifier. We using infrastructure on like a modifier to the population.
How about instead of population, it's infrastructure and farming efficiency? That's
Or
really what
just
determines
war
farming.
score. And farming efficiency isn't necessarily like for example, once again Piedmont gets like 35 farming efficiency, but it's miles better than something in France that gets 50 farming efficiency but only has 10 rural population.
Yeah,
It
or
just
like
depends
all
on
of
the
Russia
country.
has like 15 farming efficiency, but the provinces all have like 20 rural pop, and they make like 2 ducats a month.
Yeah.
Again,
I think-
the whole thing is that the war score works very nicely, and especially it works a bit better in Mio than vanilla, because it factors in. War score is a very good just baseline when involved in war for taking stuff.
Now, something that would need to be determined is, like religious war does the same thing, but for example, like the Ottoman Sultanate of Rumsey gives them everything costs 25% war score. Would
Yeah.
it be
They don't get it in
before?
multiplayer, I don't.
Yeah, they don't get that anymore in multiplayer, especially if you're a player.
Okay, well, there are
Almost
other
certainly if
ways
you're
to
playing.
reduce it, but just for the sake of everyone knows what it is,
Yeah.
like, would the Byzantines be able to take the modified war score worth of land or the pre-modified war score worth of land?
Well, the
The war
modified.
score worth of
I think
land.
For
The
example,
modif-
Constantinople with that CP would be 25 would be around 25 war score.
I think
Would
it'd be
they
the
able to-
pre-modified, because that's the
So
intent.
they'd be able to take the full 100% if the Constantinople's declared for,
Yeah.
since that is
What's
okay.
the point of getting the religious war CB then?
Well, it
Because
costs
you
you
can take
less.
more land.
You can take more, yeah.
It just means
I
It's
guess
ris-
that actually adds a benefit to special CBs, aside, because then you can declare war and almost guarantee that you get more than you could lose.
It would cost more for someone else to take the same amount, is what it would do.
Yeah, so like, it basically guarantees that the most you can gain is far greater than the most you could lose, right?
It raises the ceiling.
Yes.
Lowers, it
because
raises
if
the
you
floor and
declare
lowers
for
it.
100%, your 100% is say 4 times more than their 100%.
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully you won't be declaring for 100%. but
Yes, I know,
Well,
but
yeah, you
it's
probably
just
won't be declaring for 100%.
I do like the idea. I've been thinking. I don't really like the idea of limiting to claims, because there are instances where, say, a coastline or something. There might be the next province over in the next sea zone that you don't have a claim on or something, and it would reasonably, you could reasonably say, okay, well, you should probably be able to get that.
What
But
if
I do think
wasn't-
that you should, try and limit it to provinces that are on your border and not do snaking sort of
What if
thing.
it's
Probably
if you
make
claim
it
in
where
a
you have to
state,
take a
and
state
you
at
take
a time.
provinces in that state?
Make it where you have to take a state at a time. Off
No,
the
no.
state at a
If you have a
time.
claim in a state, you can take provinces in that state.
That makes sense.
Or you have to.
or a neighboring province that you can't fabricate a claim on because of sea zone restrictions or something like that.
Or make it to where if
know.
you have to try and finish out states. Say you declare war on France for the Pyrenees.
Well,
And you take something in the Pyrenees, you have to finish taking the Pyrenees before you move on to another state.
No, because, like, I think sometimes snakes are justified. Obviously this isn't Mayo, but in vanilla EU4, would you say Muscovy snaking around Novgorod is a justified thing?
Well, no. Against AI, again, these rules shouldn't apply. But against players, it should. A player getting snaked around.
No. He's saying like, okay, so let's say there's a player in Muscovy, there's a player in Novgorod. Is it justified if Muscovy surrounds Novgorod's capital and blocks Sweden from going into Novgorod?
Yeah, snaking is really destructive in Mayo because of the CE.
Yeah.
It's like way more destructive than it would be in regular.
In vanilla, it's probably fine.
Or like in Mayo, whenever you're conquering India, you want to take the coastline first. Theoretically, that is a snake. So sometimes I think snaking is justified.
Well, I think coastline snaking's a bit different than like I'm starting from Paris and I'm going to draw as straight a line to Berlin as I possibly can.
Yeah.
How do these rules apply to somebody who's couldn't show up for a session in their country's an AI? Like, could you just snake around?
Well, the AI
session?
doesn't really snake.
It would be the player.
A player
there's a
attacking
block.
another player's country. Who's
I just think you shouldn't be able to snake generally.
Players get protected. You should only be able to.
Yeah, our player
snake.
country's not protected. Like, what?
Yeah, player countries are always generally protected, and that's why I said the state thing. It allows you to go for a coastline, but it prevents you from snaking.
Did anyone ever come up with the solution for protected nations declaring war on other players?
No.
You just beat them down and try and wipe peace out.
Yeah, it's a really bad solution.
Yeah,
because
because in the process, the person who's defending can, oh guys, I'm just white piecing. Don't mind that I full siege their country with max looting on.
Actually, come to think of it, there is a fairly easy solution now. It takes a bit of time, but when Mayo updates, or just EU4 in general, people could hot join into that nation and then white peace.
Well, but if you don't have an extra person who's not in the game.
I mean, having your nation AI brain dead for a month isn't a big deal, since whenever you leave the game, EU4 can brain dead nations.
Yeah.
Where they do nothing at all.
Has that been updated now, or do you know?
Mayo has
No, hot join. They broke hot join. It doesn't work in EU.
No, it works in EU now.
In the updated version,
yeah, the newest version, yes. But Mayo is updating eventually.
They broke it in the patch. The most recent patch, they broke it again. I know. I sat through a game where 2 people hot joined and instantly DC.
No,
Yeah, they've broken it.
I played in a game yesterday where there was over like 20 hot joins.
Yeah, I played in a game yesterday as well, and it didn't work at all.
Well, yeah, but that's because EU4's multiplayer sucks.
So hot join is still as glitchy as ever.
Was it the same people desyncing when they joined from the thing?
It was 3 different people that all desynced when they joined.
I feel like we're straying from topic.
Sounds like a problem with the host, to be honest. See, Sebastian says, oh, it's one of those rule sessions where something obvious will be missed. But as it's not specifically pointed out in big red, someone will abuse it next session. Possibly.
Probably.
Oh, I know something that we probably need to touch on.
What's that?
I know this, and then I don't immediately start talking about it.
I
just kidding. I'm pulling it.
What is it?
We probably need to talk about this stupid thing with a person who probably need to address something with colonization and how bullshit it can be. For lack of a better
what about
word.
it?
How it ends up being that one player will just literally snake the whole continent. You need to probably address something like that.
Well, no.
What, just because they colonized down the coastline?
Yeah, no, that's
I mean,
what would happen. Colonizing the coastline is how you should colonize.
Yes,
Hmm.
but there's a difference
That's-
between.
No, that's how they colonized in real life too, because it's easier to colonize the coastline than it is to colonize the center, and that's even shown through the fact that the coastline will have higher communication efficiency.
In
Yes.
in Mayo with their new Siberian frontier mechanic though, it is it's very easy to completely colonize everything, as I found in my Hungry game I'm playing. I mean, it's like if you're the first one there, you're gonna get literally everything, because
Wait, how do you get Siberian Frontier but you're not Russian?
the colonies get it in the New World. So
Oh,
you, yeah,
just the colonial nations?
Yeah,
not
so
the
you-
host?
yeah.
Okay.
So you drop
So,
3 provinces, and then they just start spreading like cancer everywhere.
Yeah.
It's really
Well,
dumb.
so that probably has to be something about changing what the like restrictions are for those colonies.
It might be
like-
a good idea just to mod it out, to be honest, because it's really,
Yeah.
really dumb.
Or it may be just limit the amount of colonial nations each player can have too.
That
No,
that is
no,
dumb.
That's
No.
dumb. That's dumb. That's dumb. What you would have to do is something like mod it so that for a colony to click the button, they need a certain requirement first.
What?
Like maybe you could modify it so that a country can only click, or a colonial nation can only click the button if they have like only like less than 3 colonies or something like that, you know?
Wait, does a colonial nation instantly form in Mio?
Yeah. Well, you need 3 provinces in an area.
Which is less than
You could-
vanilla.
Yeah.
You could just make it be really expensive, like 200 Diplo points.
Well, just
Yeah,
the
instead
AI
of,
would
like,
just waste all
10.
its points, though.
Well, but doesn't
think
the
it's
AI
60.
not use points if it's below
No,
their
they do.
0?
I think
Oh,
it's
they do.
60 or something, as I recall. But
Just make
I don't
it
know.
cost.
It might be better just to limit it to colonists, because then you'd have a lot more colonies, right? Because then everyone could get in.
Yeah.
Two, I might. If you limit the amount of colonies too, that would let more people get into the colonial game. Is kind of what I was pushing there. Because right now, what it ends up being is like 3 players get there first, and no one else has a chance to get there, and the
Yeah.
world's taken up.
I think-
Well, like one problem too, though, is they changed the way that colonies worked in Meow, because it used to be like you got a metric butt ton, right, of colonists, but
Mhm.
it took like 10 years for a colony to show up, or like 5 years, you know. But nowadays it's like 6 months and your colonies are done, you know.
Well, that's not true. No, it takes a while.
Well, okay,
No, because
relatively it takes way
at the
less
start-
time.
at the start of the game, Mayo, you have as a colonial nation, you will have about 100 colonist growth per month, or not per month, per year. So it takes about 10 years for a colony to finish if you don't get
Yeah,
lucky.
yeah.
But on average, it'll finish about 7 after the percent, like the random percent colonist growth things.
But maybe something you could do to make to prevent all the colonial nations from instantly getting eaten up by like Spain and blah 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 is make a buffed where if you control X provinces in a colonial region, you get to colonize that region faster.
Oh,
You
it's
get more
called the
settlers.
Treaty of
Well-
Tortillas.
I mean,
Well,
that's
there's
only
also
for
the fact
Catholics.
that if a colony borders another colony, it doesn't get like the -10 debuff for
Mm-hmm.
being isolated.
adjacency.
Yeah.
And there's also the if it even borders a province as well, like if it's not an island, there's like another -10 that it doesn't have to deal with.
And like Mayo adds modifiers to like islands and stuff where all islands are slower to go, like the uninhabited
Yeah,
island
that's what I
modifier.
meant.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's see. Is there...
You think it'd be easier to colonize the uninhabited?
No, it's not, because there's like no people. There's a reason it's uninhabited.
Probably like really far away from anything. Really hard to
No
get supplies.
resources. Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
no
like for
resources.
example, Hawaii's really far from anything, but it was inhabited because people found it before. Know what I mean?
And you
People
kinda
didn't
need
start
people there
settling it until like
to like do
way,
stuff
way,
and
way
keep it
later.
Yeah.
Like the colonization like in Africa was getting kind of old news by the time Hawaii was like made a protectorate of the U.S.
So what should we do for people that legitimately can't make a session?
Beat them with sticks.
I'd probably give them protection, and if their nation gets declared
And
on,
to
you
what
have to go
extent?
fight people. Give them protection unless their nation declares, unless the AI declares one player. Because AI settings are a thing in EU4, and it's their fault if they don't
No,
set their
AI settings reset when a new game is hosted, or at least they used to.
A new session.
So if
Yeah.
they declare, so if their AI sub, or whatever you want to call it, declares war on another country, that player could just absolutely wreck them in that case.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize AI settings reset. So then, yeah, no, just make it where if they declare war on a player, the player has to peace out as quickly as possible.
What if France is the one declaring war on you?
Well,
Feels
you're
bad, man.
fucked. I mean,
Just give your
Yeah,
fingers
like
to France.
no, probably.
try.
Because like
if
the thing
hot
is, you
join
can't
is-
just like pause the game, right? Leave and like have somebody join in and then, like
Like
peace
when
out
they
because the
update.
AI will just redo it. Right.
I think it would be fine when hot join, since like in total that's like a max 5-minute pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still really don't.
But
think
like
we
I
should
don't
have-
think rehosting.
What do
is
you mean
worth
in your rules, Sengaku? What do you mean conquest only on claims? What do you mean only on
No.
provinces that you have claimed, like fabricated a claim
No,
on?
he's
Or
just
do you
putting
mean,
like it's a brainstorm
Yeah.
document.
Let's
like that really should not be a
It's
thing
a
you
brainstorm
use.
document, so he's leaving it
No.
there.
Please
Yeah,
remove it.
we
It's
did-
triggering me.
but I do think CB specific goals are good. So,
Yeah, CB specific goals are fine, but
Yeah.
conquest only by what you have claimed in a war, in a fabricating claim war would be
I think how you could make just sort of an idea how to make trade conflict a viable CB is that you could make it so that you could, because like they have ways where you can only take provinces that are a certain religion. Like maybe if
Yeah.
you could make it where
Those
trade
are broken.
conflict. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean they're broken, but if somehow you could make it where with trade conflict, you could either take like a coastal province only, like one, or if you could like take a high trade value province.
or an
Well,
important
that might
center of
work.
I mean,
trade.
Yeah, important.
That
center.
could be done just through rules rather than actually.
But you can't
like just
permanently
allow
take them.
conquest in trade conflict wars,
Hey guys, I'm gonna take constant.
and then be like you're allowed to take one
Well, okay, you would probably
one
restrict
coastal
it to stuff.
province you have occupied.
Yeah, you have to occupy it.
One thing we could do is possibly make like a player war goal that instead of, and not allow players to fabricate claims, but instead they have a war goal they can declare where they can take land, but they have to specify the CBs.
I like
Make
it.
a specific war goal that only players can declare.
I'm gonna call it a treaty port war goal because it's essentially what it is from like Victoria 2. You know?
Doesn't
Yeah.
Meow already have those though?
No,
Well,
I don't
yes,
think
but
so.
make it-
Because
Not-
doesn't Meow have a thing where you can take like certain spots off of like the East Africans and like India and stuff?
No, those are just not treaty. Those are just port provinces, which
Yeah.
have a couple of modifiers.
I'm talking about
Well, no,
specific,
but-
a specific
isn't there a war
CB.
goal?
No, there's no war goal for it. It's just
Oh, okay.
conquest. But
Alright.
or a colonial conquest. I'm talking about like a specific CB you could use against anyone to take a coastal center of trade. Maybe say it has low population or something.
Yeah,
But
that could work.
basically the idea is you could declare a limited war. You know, not have to do a full conquest, 100% kind of nonsense. But you know, if you lose, then if you're Morocco, you lose like one of your little ports or something.
Yeah.
Maybe make a. I don't know if this would be a decent idea or not, but make it to where players can't fabricate claims on players, and that they have their own special CB they can use to declare on players.
It could be
If they-
possible, but what's the point of making it where they can't fabricate claims?
Yeah.
Make the CB to where you can take anything, and just to make them have
But
to
like
use that CB when-
fabricating claims
player.
reduces the core creation cost. It reduces the
Yeah.
aggressive, like
No,
all
it
of
doesn't.
that.
Okay,
in Mayo.
maybe just make it to where you can just
In
take
Mayo,
that
yes,
stuff.
it does.
No.
Actually,
reduces
the
time.
only thing it changes is it decreases the core time, which is
Yep.
actually probably more important because cores take bloody forever in Mayo.
Yeah, doesn't reduce the cost. It does reduce the cost to take it if you're doing a conquest, because it drops it to 0. But
The dip stuff.
yeah, as far as the admin, it's the same. I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, which is well, maybe we didn't get all the way through it. How going back to the example I gave in the last video with Milan and France and everything. What how do you get Milan from wanting to ally France, or Sardinia Piedmont from wanting to ally France? And how? Because so you say the problem is that they're going to have a slower early game expansion and therefore be weaker, right?
Yes.
Now,
Possibly limit bigger nations' expansion would be
Possibly die as well.
well,
Yeah.
There's always
Like-
that.
like when I say it's okay that they expand slowly, what's
You'd
the
have
answer to
to-
that?
Well, what I'm
It-
saying is, not only are they expanding slower, nations
Sure.
like France are expanding faster
That's
because
true.
they're not committing resources to those smaller nations.
You have
So
to
it-
find a way to make it to where to slow down the expansion of bigger nations.
Well,
More
There-
than is already kind of done by even Mio.
okay, but let me give you another scenario. France expands quickly, and they don't have all these little tiny player allies. So then the little tiny player allies can ally each other, and have an
Those
actual.
little,
That's a great hypothetical,
but you're
Gaku, but
saying-
it's not gonna happen.
like what you. But the thing is, if France has all these little tiny player allies, those little tiny player allies are already allied to each other, because, like you said,
Once-
blocks are. The
No, no, no.
chains turn into blocks.
I'm saying they're not allied to all these players. I'm saying
Yes.
you have France, and it has a bunch of AE, and it could have a coalition against it. And then you've got players that are small that have AE against France, so they could join a coalition. Why wouldn't they?
Because they don't want to risk it for little gain.
They want France to help them.
Exactly, Gaku. They're not gonna
That's-
want to why risk fighting this really big, powerful nation? It's just got a lot powerful.
That is true, and it makes sense. I'm saying it's a problem, though. How could we fix it?
Remember, like, one thing
limit
is,
the-
Mayo and taxes.
Fix that would be to limit bigger nations' expansion somehow in
Something to
rules.
keep in mind is in Mayo and taxes, overextension is only a problem for small nations, unlike in vanilla.
Yes,
Um,
that's true.
As a late game large nation, you can take thousands of overextension and be perfectly fine.
How about if we? That's true as well. How about
And
if
any
we?
change you. Go ahead.
You know how every 20 years you get the estates calling for stuff, right? Roughly every 20 years. What if that were tied to the size of the nation, which I know is something they talked about doing, but they haven't done. What if the larger you are in terms of development, the more often that happens?
That would be
One thing to keep in mind is that's modified by how once they get a certain amount of privileges, they will stop asking pretty much altogether. Of course, they'll still ask somewhat. But large nations, it's not necessarily a bad thing to give the estates control of, to give them more privileges as long as it's the right privileges.
Sure.
Because everything, all of the autonomy goes to the estates, which the estates will then spend on buildings, and they will have more troops. A large nation will have enough money to give estates money on cooldown. So then, if anything, having more powerful estates isn't necessarily a bad thing, and could be a boon for a large nation if handled properly.
yes, but
where-
it makes it scale a bit better, making the estates more demanding.
Like, I've actually played of course, single player doesn't directly translate into multiplayer, but I've played a single player game as Ottomans where I intentionally let the estates get a shit ton of power, and I was actually pulling 4 times my force limit from the estates in every offensive war, and able to maintain pulling it in every offensive war. I did not have a standing army, and I was only using the estate's military.
It's also a huge pain in the ass to deal with, though.
Yeah,
But
yes,
also
what
at
I'm
the
saying,
same time,
what I'm
without being
saying
able to
is,
follow, and also it lets your army get jumped on though. If players are prepared for a war, they can jump on you and kill
but
all
if
your
you have
staff
a
as
large
needed.
mass of land, they're not going to be able to get to all, because I was raising thousands of men from the estates. They could not stack wipe all of it.
Okay, let me
No, but they
let
can
me go
stack
back.
wipe it in season.
Let me go back to
So-
what I was saying and rephrase it a little bit, okay? So yes, France might be expanding faster than theoretical Milan that doesn't have the help of France, right? But if you play single player, there's certain countries that are just going to expand on their own. Like this one I'm playing right now, Tuscany is huge, and I didn't help it; it just got huge on its own, right? So if that were a player on Tuscany, that's the reason they could get huge on their own. It's going to take them a while, but they could do it, and it's powerful enough that if there's a player France, it could actually give that player France a run for its money. And it takes a while to get to that point, though. So how do you make it where a player is okay with that slower expansion? Not because they're just, putting up with it, but like it's actually an okay outcome that it's taking them longer to get to that point. While also saying, you should be okay with doing this on your own without the help of a powerful benefactor nation overseeing everything that you're doing.
I'm not really sure in the exact answer, but before the Muslim update recently in EU4, there's the achievement where Tabaristan forms Persia, right? That's considered a really hard achievement. Yet, does anyone else notice that Tabaristan almost always, like when Timrid fell, Tabaristan would almost always take over most of the land, right?
Mm-hmm.
But over the course of the entire game. But the reason the achievement's hard is because doing it quickly is a problem. So yes, theoretically anything can be done with time, but that Tabaristan Persia would like it completes the very hard achievements, but it's not actually powerful. In that amount of time, in the amount of time it took the Tabaristan to do that slowly, the Ottomans could have full annexed all of India.
Sure. Yeah, you just have to kind of sit and wait. I remember that one.
Like, when you're sitting and waiting, people can stop you.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
If Tuscany is not, or Milan is not France's ally, what's stopping France from just literally killing them in one war?
Okay.
Because once again, this is Mayo and taxes. You don't have to take their land to kill them.
Sure.
This is a bit
So if... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it's a bit of a strange because in context of Mayo versus in context of Victoria 2, it varies considerably.
Yeah, Vicky 2 rules don't always apply quite.
Like your options for expansion are very limited. There's like Sardinia, Piedmont in Victoria 2, whereas in Mayo you have lots of options. Like you can't just declare war on Modena in Victoria 2 or Sardinia and not expect to get your shit pushed in by Austria. Whereas Milan could like attack its little Italian neighbors in Mayo and be relatively fine.
And also, I think it's a situation where you can't have diplomacy absent coalitions, because, if Milan wants to expand in the area and then France wants to get involved, there's a situation where other people can say, well, we don't want France to get involved, so we're going to band together and support Milan in this case.
But how often does that happen?
Like
Well,
Austria would never
it could
do this.
happen.
Also,
For-
your Discord thing is like slightly triggering me.
What are you talking about?
Your Discord being over the
Why?
thing in Twitch.
I think that's just
Triggering
a
me.
you problem, last resort.
Yeah, that's
Don't
that's a
make this
that's a
about God.
personal problem.
This is your problem you deal with.
I mean, is that unreasonable, though? It's like,
Yes,
You know,
having your
if-
Discord there is very
it's
unreasonable.
not what I'm talking
Speaking
about.
of what
I like that.
Gusko just said in Twitch chat, where saying it's not the same for Vicky 2, but saying like if EU4 had a game master role, it would be nice. No, if the host was willing to do that, that is theoretically possible, because if the host enters into observer mode after the game starts, they have control over every nation theoretically. It's a glitch in the game.
Hmm.
So if, say, the host played like Modena, for example, and then got annexed by Milan, they could control every player and AI's nation.
Huh.
Now the host would be giving up their game, but it is something. Like, I'm not saying that should ever happen, but that would fix some problems. Like, maybe if the host was on a separate computer and was just always put into an observer state, that could deal with like the AI
Yeah.
like the AI declaring war when it's protected. They could just peace out, or
Is that practical? Is that...
no, but I'm more saying like that technically is possible if anyone had any plans for that.
I couldn't
I
do
mean,
it,
if
no.
somebody would pay like the $10 for another E4, it would be fairly practical.
Well,
Or if I could figure out how my friend did the crack that actually works with Steam, that'd be practical as well.
I don't think that's practical, personally.
Yeah.
I think the hot join solution is the better one when we get to that point.
Once
Yeah,
again,
that
this is
solution would
brainstorming. I'm
also
not
allow
necessarily agreeing with everything I'm saying. I'm just trying to state everything that's a possibility.
That would also, though, fix other...
I'm still trying to think of something to do about the different rates of expansion, because I think that's a big part of what leads to coalitions. If you say, I have to ally France, otherwise, you know, XYZ.
Possibly limit players based off their starting population.
Like, once
they can
No,
expand
limiting
per
players
se.
isn't fun.
Like, back to the Milan and France thing. Like, even if France doesn't directly help Milan, just Milan being allied to France allows them to significantly increase their own rate of expansion.
Yeah, they don't have to worry about coalitions.
Yeah.
Which I think is a problem too.
Especially because, like, Milan actually expands relatively fast in this scenario.
Yeah.
You know?
If they have France.
Well, no, I mean, even just, like,
in
Italy,
Mayo, they don't expand that quickly with it. In a player game, due to any player could join their, could set off their coalition.
Now again, the whole.
Do you mean like an AE coalition, or do you mean like a player coalition?
AE.
Well, in Milan, it's not actually that hard to not get 50 AE. You just vassalize everyone. Because vassalizing it doesn't even give the same AE for the full cost of the provinces.
So I'm thinking about the Sunday game, where I think Freddie was playing France, and he had at one point there were all these restrictions on who couldn't ally who. It was like before any of the thresholds had been met for who can start allying each other. And what France did was he allied a bunch of AIs. So all of the powerful AIs in the area that were technically not against the rules to be allied were his allies. Which in some ways I think is better than allying the players, but it also limited the players in the area, you know? So like if Milan's not allied with France, but then France is allied with everyone that Milan might reasonably expand into, then you have the same problem. And I've been trying to think of a way through this, and I'm going back to when I was playing Austria in the Saturday game, and I wasn't really allied with anyone, and I thought that was a good solution. And for me individually it wasn't a good solution, but for the game I think it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Possibly the best solution may be, and it's not good for the individual player, is to limit big nations expansion maybe the first session. Just to allow little nations to catch up.
No.
That
like,
doesn't
even
solve
limiting
anything.
their expansion the first session allows them to build up money and stuff, which they can then use to rapidly expand the second.
So there were...
Oh, I just turned my army maintenance to 0, and then now I have, 3,000 ducats that I get to spend by just having my army on full maintenance.
And like in Mayo, theoretically Milan can become fairly powerful by not expanding and just building up cities.
Yeah.
So that doesn't. So imagine if in France, instead of investing their money in wars, then built up cities 4 times as fast as Milan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, here's like one potential solution, right? So the thing where you say the top 4 players allying to each other or can't ally with each other doesn't work, because we tried that, and
Yep.
it just limits
Maybe the top 4 players can't ally anyone for the session or whatever.
No.
something
One
something
instance.
like that. But here's what I'm thinking. So like if you're the number 1 player, you can't ally anyone, like no allies, 0 player or AI.
Okay.
If you're the number 2 player, you could have 1 ally, whoever that happens to be. If it's an AI, it's an AI. If it's a player, it's a player. And then so on down the list. So the further you are down the list, the more options you have. And it also means that the more powerful you are, you have to really own it. You
Now,
know?
is that taking into account things like Ming? Like, is Ming going to always occupy that number 1 spot, or is
No.
it going to only count
No,
players?
it's
Players.
player. It's
Gaku.
players.
Players.
So like, if Gaku is Austria owning all of Germany and Eastern Europe, right? Then he's top
he's-
player.
If he's Germany,
Can't
that's not
ally
leaving.
anyone.
That might work later in the game, but I don't think early game that would work whatsoever. Because like, imagine when Castile reunites, and then Castile and England are like, okay, now let's just eat into France. France is probably going to be number 1 for the first 300% wars if they split their land properly. And then France literally gets no allies, even though they are significantly stronger than him. Like, Castile, when united and its autonomy fixes itself after like 5 years, will make more money than France, but have significantly less population.
Is
So
it
I
a
don't
problem?
think that's... Like, I don't think the Great Power is anywhere near a valid judge of how strong a nation is.
Yeah, it's
What about
Yeah.
force limit?
That's
No,
still
because
not-
that's based on pure population, and then Russia is going to end up on top a lot of the
Like
time.
that doesn't really mean that they can field that many people
Yeah.
if they're
Like-
not central.
What
Like
about-
we all know that
What
you
about-
can't really field more than 80 guys
Sure.
in Meow, especially.
What about say maximum military expenditure? Like if you max your sliders, and that's your measure.
Well, then people would just delete a bunch of units to go to the war and then hire. That's
No.
incredibly explosive.
But also, what if your tech is way worse?
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with this is people are going to be biased mid-session, but I think most of us could be relatively accurate judge of who's more likely to win a war at the start of the war.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, obviously, people are going to be biased, but like, I don't think there's a way to write down like an overarching war rule that would work in any session to say who's who can be in a war and who can be in what allies. I think it would have to be really just a judge situation by situation, but people would be very... I feel like there's going to be bias towards that then.
That's why I like the GM type thing again, where someone can
Yeah.
go in and kind of just compare nations.
But
Tax income, that could work.
Well,
I think income would probably
like
be
the total income, not the...
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially now that they fixed it, I think total income will be the best scale of how powerful a nation is.
I
And
mean,
you can
even
check that in the ledger, but the
well,
ledger would have to be
ledge
unlocked.
is usually locked. If that were, even if we were to like change the exact details, do you think that's a good general principle?
Yeah, like having a limit on who can ally who based on your... The only problem I see is like that when people are up and coming,
Big nations aren't going to want to ally a little nation.
well, no,
Again,
no,
I
no,
see
no,
that
no.
happening.
Oh, actually, what I'm thinking doesn't really work because we said no great power thing. But like, you know, when you're sort of up and coming, if you're like catching up to somebody else, and then you're sort of at about the same tax level, you know.
Yeah.
Like, let's say France is making like 132 and Spain is making 129. but then France gets one of those events where it's like, oh, minus 5% taxes for 10 years. Well, now Spain is above France for a little bit.
You
So
could
then
say
they have to
something
change
like
the
a
rules.
10% threshold, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Like if
It
you're
would have to be kind of like how the great powers, they have a time limit before they flip.
yeah,
But otherwise, yeah, I
or
think it
just
would
say
work.
like
Or make it
if-
within
People aren't
10
going to be looking at the income literally every month of the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, like on a per session basis, maybe.
No,
you'd say like
Mayo
if
and Taxes doesn't actually have like events for empire-wide tax modifiers. They're individual province-wide, aren't they? Like happy provinces,
No,
2.5%.
No,
Like
because you can get
2.5%.
those events like, what's it called? You can have like a large. There's like an event called something like a large harvest where it gives you like 0.5% more taxes for a year or something, right? But that still happens.
Yeah,
Well, I
but they're
think-
nowhere near as influential as the ones in vanilla, where it's like double tax for a year.
Sure.
Yeah, you know that one event where it's like plus 15% trade efficiency plus 300
Yeah.
ducats.
I would-
I think in Mayo that fixes a lot of the problems of fluctuating income.
I would-
Especially now that they changed, or well, they did this a little while ago, but they changed it from like all of your like education and stuff being drawn from your tax. It's now drawn in your capital's maintenance. So there's really, I think income's fairly stable in Mayo.
So like if it were a 10% difference, you could say like, you know, if you're 120 and if someone's up to 132, then you would be in the same bracket basically, and then if one
Yeah.
of you was way out ahead, then that would be the person who wasn't allowed to have any allies. Maybe if you
maybe
would
make
tie-
it 10 ducat income or 20 ducat income.
10%, that's
Fair
what I'm
gap.
saying. But like if you know, if you're both tied in the same bracket, then you would round down, so you would both be tied for second rather than first, you know? So since you're both second, you could both have one ally.
Or they could just ally one another and keep themselves in the same tax bracket and have this super ridiculously powerful alliance.
They could. Hopefully they wouldn't, but they could. But what they couldn't do is ally each other and 4 other people, which
Very well
is a big difference.
But it would be like you say there was someone a similar size to your Austria Gaku. And
Yes.
you got to ally them. It wouldn't really matter if you could ally 4 other people.
Sure would.
And I can
Yeah,
see them getting
because
that
then it
out.
was like, because for a while Gaku was allied to like Wallachia in his Super Austria, right? And that sort of prevented everyone from attacking him until the moment that, you know, we flipped Wallachia to our side, and then everybody
Until the
dogpiled
moment
it.
Chibi was Chibi.
Yeah.
Your Chibi. Is it Chibi or Chibi?
I think it's Chubi.
Chibi.
But yeah, I don't really see that as a problem. I think that worked out well.
Yes, it led to a much more very balanced
Good
game.
guy Austria.
Good guy Austria completing the Lebensraum.
Nice.
Does that need to be a rule or like a guideline though? I mean, as a guideline, it would be the more powerful you are, the less allies you should have.
Well, no, that
Well,
probably
unless you
that would
should
need to be a
need,
rule.
really.
Yeah.
Like, the stronger you are, you shouldn't even need that many. A lot of times it's just for convenience.
And you ally people to cook over your enemies more than you do to benefit you. That's something I've seen
Why
happen. in
fight a
multiplayer
hard
as
war
well.
when you can fight an easy war?
Mhm.
Kind of.
Well, I'm gonna,
It's like you ally, for example, say Mamluk. You have a Mamluks and an Ottomans who have been able to kill each other because they've been about the same power level the whole game. Well, Mamluk just started going into Iberia, so the Ottomans, who doesn't really need Spain's help because is very weak. Iberia's like divided up into 3 nations. Spain's been split in half by like Aragon and Portugal, and they're still like on the southern bit. Well, that southern bit, say the Ottomans ally that, they're allying it to block Mamluk's expansion more than anything else.
yeah.
When you get very big, you more ally to cuck other players than you do to help yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
And that sort of prevents that
Maybe
as
it
well.
could be something like, rather than who you're allowed to ally, something like who you're allowed to call into wars.
How does
Where
that
like you could,
change things?
whereas like for example, Milan and France, well, France can have his entire alliance block, but theoretically, when England's like, I'm declaring war on France, calling in no allies, then he gets to, like, within whatever certain threshold, match the income and choose which allies to call, and they'll just dissolve alliances with whoever he can't call in. That way,
They don't really have a
smaller
choice who you call in, though, if you're defending.
Well, yes, that's what I'm saying.
You would pause the game.
Pause, say, I'm declaring war on this with these people helping me.
Yeah.
And then they dissolve whoever they can't call in.
That works in Victoria, not so well in EU.
Yeah.
In Mio, just remove the penalty between players, specifically between players, or give a player bonus with other players for being nice. And remove the truces maybe between players for breaking alliances, for that specific reason.
I mean, I kind of like the truces, to be honest, because they limit.
Yeah, so do I.
They limit how much you can cheese it. That's part of the reason it's there.
I know, but
Cheesing truces. Never
or
heard
maybe
of it
make it
before.
to where if you don't accept a defensive call, it break your alliance. It just gives
You could just remove the penalty for a defensive call, because honestly, like, that's not the reason why people don't accept the defensive call most of the time.
Yeah, that's true. But again, I don't think people should be allied if they're not actually allied.
Well, no, do it to where that
but
France can only call in.
The reason
France can have as many allies as they want. They can only call in one if they're the number great power. So that if Spain is like 6 and they could call in 5 allies, they can call in France into their war, and they can still call in 4 other allies, up to 4 other allies. Do it that way so that it doesn't prevent France from trying to only ally the most powerful nation possible.
Why would you not want to
Instead-
prevent France from allying the most powerful nation possible?
What I would
From
main
only doing that.
the main reason for my suggestion was because that still allows him to ally the smaller nations and allow them to use that to their advantage, but he does not get the advantage of having like 10 allies because of French diplomatic relations. He doesn't get the advantage of his massive alliance block. He does get, but the small people do get the advantage of being allied to France.
Oh, there's a bunch more in the chat here. What is this?
If you guys are watching on Twitch, I can help Gaku out too. If you'll
Total income of the top 10 nations is 1,000 a month, and if you make 120 a month, you're only allowed to have allies. Not sure what that means.
essentially it's doing income bracket allies. Think U.S. government tax bracket, but with allies.
That just sounds annoying.
That sounds really hard to figure out.
Yeah.
Yes, that sounds terribly complicated. That's why, again, I like the idea of France, and you're clear, and we do measure it by income, and you have the most income. You can only ever call in one ally to a war. Don't limit how many allies you have, just however many you can call into a war offensively or defensively.
I think realistically, players could just look at a game and say, you're the most powerful, and agree, and then say, because you're the most powerful, you get 0 allies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but instead of doing the 0 allies thing, I like that.
Or one, or whatever the limit is. We'll say 1,
yeah,
maybe.
I would say instead of how many allies you have, however many you can call into a war.
No, I
That
disagree.
way,
No, that's dumb. That's
The
dumb.
whole problem with the allies is that they buffer each other when they're not in war. It prevents coalitions.
I also don't think it should be like definitive. Like, obviously sometimes there will be, but I don't think there should be like definitive. There can only be one strongest nation. Just for example, say France versus Ottomans. France has 1 more force limit. He has 0.1 higher morale. He has 1 more income, so on and so forth. It shouldn't be, well, France, yes, he is objectively stronger than the Ottomans,
Yeah.
but the difference is so minuscule that it should be irrelevant.
Sure, and that's
Yeah,
a
it should
case
be
where I
a
think they'd be tied for second, you know?
Yeah.
And then they would ally one another and just try and keep it in that ballpark. And cook over the rest
No.
of the world.
No, they wouldn't.
I don't think
No.
anyone would do that.
I'd have to do it at least once to break your rules, but that's besides the point. If I ever get in that position.
And then
But
you
I'm so
rage
bad
quit
at
when
the
you
game,
get
I
beat.
doubt that.
So it's like, okay. That's why I say
I'm
you
not
gotta
that bad.
be willing to to, you know, if you're gonna live by the sword, you gotta die by the sword. You gotta be prepared for that. So if you want to go out of your way to break the spirit of the rules, then you're probably gonna get cucked.
Get cucked, so.
And if you don't, then, you know, I guess it's everyone else's fault for not doing it.
Allahu Akbar.
But I think it is reasonable to say, you know, for however many players there are in a session, just go through at the beginning of the session, say you're the most powerful, you're in the ballpark, so you're equivalent, and we're going to tie you for second, so you both get one ally, whoever that happens to be. You know, the next would be...
At least some sort of mini evaluation after every major event or player war. Like,
Yeah.
for example, if France is the most powerful, obviously you're not going to go every month and compare his income, but then say Spain gets the Iberian wedding, then it's probably worth reevaluating who's more powerful.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Obama.
I'm sorry? How is that relevant? What the fuck, last resort?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I just wanted to see the response.
But yeah, that would be
Okay.
something really easy just to pop into a spreadsheet. And it might be that half the players end up in the same bracket, right? And that's fine.
Yeah.
But
that's
at
fine.
least you would have some limit on the ones at the top who are the ones really calling the shots. And again, it doesn't. They don't have to be allied with people. So like, if I had one ally, right? If that was my limit, I would either personally probably have an AI that I wanted to strengthen or use as a buffer, or I would just leave it open. Because then, if it's open, then I can shift it around as needed. And
Like Australia allying Hungary, for example.
Now,
and they have one alliance.
would that one like we also kind of have to define what that one ally is. Is that someone you have an alliance with, or
it's
could
one
France
diplomatic
get-
action, like I defined
So-
before. So if that's a guarantee, then that's it. If it's an actual alliance, then that's it.
And I
If
also
it's a
want to
subject
put
or
forth
no?
that condottieri isn't always necessarily that diplomatic action. Because you had listed that as a thing. But there are times when people will want to give out condottieri and not
Yeah.
necessarily be allied to people.
True.
Yeah.
That's
They
business.
just want to do it to get money.
Like, for
Yeah.
example, that it might be a money thing where it's better for you than it is to lose, or for like, say, France never wants to ally, say, Hungary, but he doesn't want Hungary to die to Ottomans, so
Sure.
he goes ahead and gives Hungary the 20 troops or whatever in condottieri to defend him, stuff like that.
You know, on the one hand, I don't like having restrictions on them, but on the other, I think it's needed.
I wouldn't restrict Condottieri.
It's like
kind of absurd when you're giving half your army to somebody.
in the Demian rules where it's like you gotta ask for 2x. It's stupid because you just give them the money and then you ask for it back. But it's like, there's got to be some reasonable limit where you say if it's above this amount, then it's legit, and if it's below this amount, then it's effectively an alliance or guarantee. You know?
Yeah.
Because
You
like,
have to
Well, I mean,
if-
you could just
Free
say
Condottieri, I don't
20% or something.
like. I don't like
Maybe
that
maybe a
Condottieri
country can
exists.
only give up to 30% of its force limit. If it gives more than that, it's an alliance.
no, because you have a
And-
huge
I
nation.
don't think
that,
that's necessary, since like condottieri is literal. It's historically it's the fact that Italian nations would literally rent out their entire armies.
Well, then maybe
So-
make it the way if you don't make a profit from the Condottieri, you
Yeah, I think like
Imagine
maybe.
being in an army that's getting rented out to somebody else. Hey, we're gonna go fight for our country.
Like
Oh,
I
wait,
said,
where are we?
even if the limit was you had to rent out the full amount, right? So then I just send you the money, and then I ask, okay, well now you're gonna pay me that same money back for a 1x Condottieri, you know?
you have to
And-
make a profit, and you can't make that rule. You have to make a profit from it.
Well, how do you judge a profit? Because now you've taken losses, and now you've lost money, you know?
Well,
How much
roughly
is
a
manpower
profit.
worth?
Yeah.
Is it a
Well,
duck and
a
a man?
gold profit.
What is the value of a man?
you have to at least
Nothing,
charge
'cause
the
it's
amount
free.
it would be to.
Like a
You have to
1x?
charge at least
Yeah,
1x.
But
I'd say
again,
1.5.
again, you could just send the money and you get around it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, make it
Yeah.
where you can't send the money back to the person. They have to actually
Well,
pay.
but
That's
how do
why
you
I said
control
have to
that?
make
It's
profit.
really not that hard to send somebody a gift and have nobody know that it happens if you don't put it in chat. You know?
Can you check the modifiers, like the relation modifiers between the two?
Well, no, you can literally get pop-ups when people send gifts. You can set that up. Like anyone
That's
sends
true.
anyone a gift, you can get
Okay.
a pop-up.
That's the
Is
tedious
that
shit
really
that's going
worth
on then.
moderating though?
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth doing
it's
it because
kind of-
Kandadarati is.
I mean, we are here kind of talking about how, like, people's attitude towards the game is one of the biggest problems,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, like, you're going... So, if
I
we're going
think.
to be based...
Oh, go ahead.
Like, if we're going to be having a conversation about people's attitude, we kind of have to. Like, based on the fact that if this works, people's attitude is going to change and they're going to follow through with whatever's decided, right?
Yeah, personally I see two reasons for using Kandadarati. One is a de facto alliance, which is the most common way players use them in multiplayer, and the other way is to cheese money out of AIs. And
Like me.
like, you know, they need troops, so you ask them like 1.2x, here we go, and then you just leave your troops at home and they pay you, and then
Well, yeah,
they
but
just
the
get
AI,
screwed.
you get a big modifier with the AI. You do that once. All of the AI
No,
know
no,
this, so
no,
they'll-
no, no. The thing is, right?
Granted, they
like,
fix that.
No. Okay, right. So people say like, oh, you just leave them at home. You don't even need to leave them at home. You can go fight one battle, and
Sure.
the AI will think you've done enough for literally like 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? Which is how I bankrupted Spain in
Yeah.
the last Saturaty game, right?
Mhm.
I sent them as much as they would accept it for because they had no army and lots of income. And then I sieged like 2 provinces that didn't even have forts on them. I fought like half a battle, right? And then I sat in Portugal for the rest of the war as Spain built a 40k strong army
Yeah.
and sent them up to England. I did nothing, and they paid me like 20 ducats a month for like 3 years.
Yeah. I think that's a problem though. Maybe you agree.
Yeah, I agree. That's a problem. That's what I'm saying. This is why you can't like,
Yeah.
you know, do that.
We could modify AI's opinion to always have a -1000 for accepting anything besides free Condottieri.
Well, it's still an effective alliance in that case, you know.
But
Yeah.
is it really a problem? Like, is sending Condottieri to an AI really a problem?
Can be, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
like what if a player's
Like you're just trying to cuck a player who's trying to
Yeah.
fight that AI. Yeah. Or let's take
I'm
another.
Austria, I'm conquering Bohemia. Oh, I'm Brandenburg, here Bohemia, take my free Condadarati.
Yeah, remember the Ottomans? Here they
Bohemia's
come.
10k stronger.
Yeah, here
Yeah,
comes
or the
20k. But like, let's say we did have this limit, right? So let's say you are the Ottomans and you want to send Condadarati, right? So you send them to Bohemia, but that's all you can do because that's your one alliance. Meanwhile, Austria, if they're weaker, maybe they're 3rd, 4th tier or something, so they can have like 5 alliances. So they can have other players come in and say, oh, look, the Ottomans are being a dick. Let's go kill their 20 stack, you know? So they can do that. They have that option.
I don't think Condattari, maybe we should have a thing
And
for
does receiving
Condattari.
Condottieri count as an alliance?
Yeah? Yeah, it would.
Gaku, maybe have that be a different thing. Have you can send X amount of Condattari as well tied to that. Where you can send like it's the Ottomans or whatever. You can send one Condattari without it counting against you
No.
for your alliance diplomatic
No.
action.
No.
She can only send 20k max anyway, so you're gonna send 20k.
Or 30 if you take
yeah.
mercenary ideas. But
And I know some groups have rules about like you gotta have this idea group, or you can only send this many, or you have to charge this much. But they're so easy to get around it. I don't see the point. I think
Yeah.
I think they
We
should
could
just.
just ban it all together. I think we should either ban it all together, but it shouldn't
No.
count as a diplomatic
No,
thing. I
because
think it should just be
it's a
banned.
nice thing, honestly,
Yeah, it's
because
useful.
it can be useful.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's a good alternative to an alliance too. So yeah, you can have a proxy war using Condadarati, And that
But it's
makes a
only-
lot more
Maybe-
sense than having a world
So-
war over a province.
Gaku, maybe remove
What?
Maybe have it be like
maybe remove the limit if you're going to do that. Then if you're going to counter as a full diplomatic relation, and that's all they can do diplomatically for the whole game, for the whole session. Remove the limit then that they can set.
yeah. Is it the whole session or at any one time?
Well, in that case, it would be any one time.
Oh, so they can't send Condorati to 2 nations at a time, but
Yeah.
it doesn't count for. They can only send 20k once during the whole session.
Well, like,
No.
if you're...
They could
if-
send it 10 different times throughout the session.
Yeah.
It's just they can't be allied to anyone at that time.
Yeah, so if you're France, and if you have an
Oh,
ally,
that's fine.
then you can't send Condottirati, period.
Oh,
right?
that's fine. I thought it was you could only send and once, and
No,
that's
no,
all you
no,
could
no.
do the whole
This,
session.
this is a different
Especially because the
scenario.
Meow game will last like 50 years, and you can fight like
Yeah.
10 wars in 50 years.
I mean, personally, I think that's a good solution with
Oh yeah, that's
limiting
fine.
that way. Because you can
Yeah, and
shift
maybe-
around as much as you want, and then we don't have to worry about, 2 sessions and then keeping track of the third one or anything, because it would just be this how many slots you get, however you want to use it, that's up to you, but that's how many you get, and that's what you got to manage. What do you think?
Yeah, and maybe check it every 6 months or something. Have the time you check it every.
6 months is pretty quick, but I think after every major war is a good time. If you take a bunch of land, then it's time to reevaluate. If you lose a bunch of land, it's time to reevaluate.
Yeah.
If you smoke too much weed, it's time to reevaluate.
Well, that's every day. Jeez. Can't do that. So yeah,
Expensive.
I think that's pretty good general
Also, we should
outcome and
probably-
rule set.
When do they do the when do they do the CE check?
I don't
Every
know.
5 years.
Every 5 years, you should also do it because that could be a very large impact.
I don't think
as
it's
well.
exactly every 5 years. I think there's a
So it's every
modifier that
5 ye-
there's a modifier that countries get though.
No.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
C.
like
Click the
based on the
button.
5-year pulse or something. So like it fires every 5 years for each country, but each country has a different 5-year pulse
Oh, okay.
or
That makes
something like
sense.
that. I think is how it works.
All right. I knew it
Okay,
wasn't
then if
5
it's
years
not
for
a-
everyone, but
Yeah, if it's not a uniform time, then you can't do that. But that would be the perfect time to check. Because
Yeah.
you can take a bunch of land in a war, but it not really give you a big buff. It just
Well,
hurts.
no,
one nation.
actually, taking land will decrease your income temporarily due to overextension.
yep.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not the income though. It's
No, overextension is directly income because whenever you have overextension, it reduces your yearly income.
it doesn't come out as state expenses.
I
No,
don't think for overextension.
It's a minus tax income that it
Yeah,
just sticks
overextension
to
is
capital.
minus tax. Everything
Okay.
else is state expenses.
All right.
So that would kind of have to be self-reporting, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, personally, I think we've gone over a lot of things that are quite useful. Is there anything else you guys can think of? Like common problems that need to be dealt with?
Chubby? No.
People from the Balkans in general.
I think the guidelines are pretty good.
I think at some point, like even if it's just at the end of the game, I think having a large coalition war can be pretty fun.
Sure.
So
That's why I was a kind of an idea was at the end of every session have a randomized coalition war.
That's
Just
too
fire.
Well,
quick.
randomized would be pretty. Sick.
every session coalition war isn't that's
That's
the
so
last
dumb.
resort.
Yeah.
But
Like,
you don't gain or
Because
lose anything.
You need to spend the whole next session recovering from the
Why
coalition
would
war.
you fight a war that you don't get anything from?
Yeah.
Fun. I mean, but like in it, you get money back or whatever to rebuild your nation.
We
and
did.
it's just you do that for score.
But then why have the coalition war?
For score, and that's how you win the game. You get score based off whether you win or lose in your coalition.
A long
Boy.
time ago, we did a Vic 2 coalition game. We called it Mohammed Jihad. And everyone playing had a different little shit nation in the Middle East. And we divided up with a draft as to who was going to be Sunni and who was going to be Shiite. And then we normalized all the countries, so they all had exactly 6 million pop. And they could all, field roughly equivalent armies. At the end of every session, we just had a big clusterfuck war. And it was
No.
pretty hilarious, but you know, it was useless. So it was just a complete meme game, but it was fun. But I wouldn't want to do that in a real campaign because it was just like everyone's country was destroyed. You know, everyone had to rebuild their whole army after every war, and then the Ottomans were just kind of sitting there looking to pick people off because like everyone's busy in the wars. So it was a lot of fun. Oh, and the MVP of every session got Jerusalem, so which isn't as good as it sounds because you'd end up with a really pissed off Jerusalem. It was useless.
Why wouldn't you just get Mecca?
Because
You know,
Jerusalem's funnier.
yeah,
Reasonable.
And Mecca is taking it away from another country.
right.
I just like to remind everyone that we made all of Jerusalem Catholic in the last Saturaty game.
Yeah,
And eradicated all the Palestinians and replaced them with Arameans or whatever.
that's right.
That was great. Kind of sad I didn't get to replace all of Egypt with Coptics, but oh well.
What about like religious conversions? What do you think? Because there's some really cheesy things people do.
Honestly, I don't think it should be allowed.
Well,
I
like,
think you
flip-
should be a.
in Mayo,
like-
it's a lot harder to convert religions, and if you're going through the effort of doing something, I think that's
No. It is not hard at all, okay? I took a massive Italy, and I flipped them all the way to my Ephesite, which is 4 religious conversions. It took me 40 years, right? Which was like 1 session. I didn't lose more than 3 stability, I'm pretty sure. Okay? It takes no effort. There's no penalty to it, except you have more revolts. But that's not hard when you have low autonomy, right?
Yeah.
So, you know,
Well, in Victoria
all
too,
Catholic
it's a
is
secularized world. We don't have such issues.
Say something like, I don't know, if you have less. It tells you how much support you have for changing, right?
yeah.
And it says
So it would
like
have
you're
to be
gonna
like
you're gonna lose X number of stabilities. So I think if you're gonna lose more than 1, then you shouldn't be allowed to do it.
then it's actually really hard to change, even if you're gonna flip like from Catholic to Protestant.
Yeah.
Is it?
It
I
should-
guess so.
Yeah, because most of the time you'll
Gonna
have
lose
like
2
minus
or at
2
least.
to 3,
It
Yeah.
should.
but like a lot of the times, like the worst you can do is get like minus 6. I'm pretty sure you can get like minus 2 from each of the 3 things.
Hmm.
So like
So if
probably
you're gonna
minus like 2.
so if
at
you're gonna
most.
lose more than -2, you're not allowed to do it, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
just-
it would just be better to limit the amount of you could have. In
But I don't
X
think
amount of years.
I don't think you can flip between like Islam and Christianity.
No.
Or like between Western and Eastern Christianity or anything like that.
or you could just accidentally let the rebels take over, you know?
Western and Eastern, I think, is fine. Like,
Well, but
Like that
but
does-
then you have a Catholic country flipping to Miaphysite.
yeah, but I mean, like,
Potentially.
Muscovy gets events to switch to Catholic, for example. They literally
I
get
guess,
events where the Pope's
yeah.
like, here, I'll give you a fuck ton of money to switch to Catholic.
Well, wasn't like a nation like
Well, that's a
Lithuania, like who
decision.
expands and gets tons of Orthodox land when it flipped to Orthodox then, even though they're Catholic?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
also a very.
But would you want to? Because like your big friend in the region is Poland.
Maybe
You
Russia
know.
could be a big
Like-
friend instead.
If you're Russia and you're taking over a bunch of land in the steppes, then you get giant rebellion you can't deal with. And, you know, you end up with Sunnis everywhere. Then what?
You join the war.
You purge the heretics, obviously.
Which ones?
You didn't get them down enough, obviously.
Yeah, obviously you
They
didn't
still have
murder
some fight
enough.
spirit.
Obviously you didn't murder enough kebab on your way through the steppes.
Just move the Cossacks in to civilize them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm kind of sad that at least in the Russia thing, there's not like some like every time you conquer a province in the steppes, there's not like some Cossacks moving in thing where it converts a bunch of the province to Orthodox or something like that. Because that would be, I think that would be a cool flavor event.
Yeah.
Weren't the Cossacks? I thought the Cossacks weren't Orthodox.
I think
Oh,
they were
they
kind
were.
of a bit of everything. They had some Muslims. They
it
had
really depend on where they
Christians.
were.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't make sense, what you just literally said.
Well, they were moved in to like
Well,
control the locals.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
you think that the czar wouldn't be like, okay, I'm gonna pick all the Muslim guys to send to control the Muslims. They're totally not gonna revolt.
It's not
guys,
like
I
there's-
promise.
The thing is, it's not like he had an infinite number of Cossacks that he could just be like, okay, because like,
Well, I
if
mean, a
done
lot of it
correctly,
was
you
just
can-
their nobility too, though. They sent like nobles east for a while.
Would they give a band of Cossacks a region to control?
Yeah.
The Don Cossacks, the Dnieper Cossacks.
So,
Rip.
I think we're pretty well done, set. Got some good rules and guidelines for going forward.
For Mayo,
Yeah.
at least.
I'm gonna, yeah. Well,
Not a whole lot
some
for
of this is
Victoria.
applicable to other things, but some of it
I
isn't.
mean, you need to alter it, I think.
Obviously, all these rules work for EU3
Victoria too.
without modification.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's all go play CK2 game.
Oh God, I'm gonna be
Same
making.
exact rules.
I'm gonna be making one more video where I talk about the guidelines, not the rules, but the guidelines, because that's applicable to everything. And I think it's something that would benefit the Tuesday group certainly. If people would, a lot of it does come down to game theory. You know, just the idea. Everyone's gonna have better time if you don't
Well, I
do
think
so at
the
everyone
idea-
else's expense.
Like anyone that has the idea that I have to win,
Yeah.
is, like, isn't theoretically the best idea for a long term, like a long term game.
And yeah, and if it were a short game like Hoi 4 maybe that you play over the course of an afternoon, then it'd be fun. But you have to meet the same people week after week for hours, and not want to literally kill each other by the time you're done, and hopefully not run them off either, because if you piss someone off enough, then they're never coming back, and that's one less player. So you gotta.
Another idea, not necessarily a good idea, but you could also randomize alliances every session. Like put nations into categories and then make alliance blocks of every session. Just roll for your alliances and you have to work together.
That's kind of what the coalition thing is, but
Yeah, that randomizing coalitions might work better in EU4, because in Victoria too, it doesn't really make sense that Austria would get put on a different side from Germany.
well, yeah, obviously.
You
that's
roll
the
for your
thing.
alliances, and
Yeah, you
you're
get,
playing
like,
the Saturaty game, and Gaku has to ally Colombia.
Yeah, you get like Austria and Italy versus France and Germany or something weird. Like what
Oh no,
happens
that's
after-
why
like-
you would do brackets. You would
This-
have like the top.
Yeah,
Do you see Burgundy's idea?
Yeah.
like
Only people who have
Theoretic-
lost
like,
their virginity
France-
can ally each other. I like it.
France and Germany, but like on a small scale, you would have like
That's just a
uh,
trip to Vegas.
France, Germany be a bracket, Austria, Spain be a bracket, and Italy.
I wouldn't put Austria in the same bracket as Spain.
Yeah.
Like Spain's kind of shit tier.
Ottomans, I think,
Like
or
the
Italy.
top two would be like Germany,
Well, whatever.
Russia, UK, USA.
Yeah,
Those
and
would
then
be
like
top tier.
it would be like,
Then, like,
say, if it was those
We're
four.
talking. We're not talking about Vicky. We're talking.
Again,
They were talking about
Ran-
whatever we wanted to talk
Up top,
randomizing
I wanna
it?
talk about-
randomizing and then having one giant war is not the solution, though. That's the end of the game. Which, if that's
No,
how you
but
want to
no,
end the game,
'cause-
great. But
No, but Gaku, the thing is, if then Germany, say there are 4 top tier, and Germany
Uh-huh.
takes land from France,
uh huh,
and then randomize, and Germany and France get on the same team,
yeah,
that would mean that the other team then has one winner and one loser too,
sure.
and there aren't necessarily one coalition isn't weaker because then know what I mean? It's not a compounding effect because there are random coalitions that
Or what
in
if-
every game.
What if France loses to NGF or Germany, and then they join the other coalition, then they lose to Italy, then they join another one, they lose to Spain. It's just a very,
Then they
very
go
pissed
down a
off
bracket and
France.
someone else, then they're in a
Yeah.
lower bracket.
They're bad at the game. Pick
Yeah.
Belgium.
Well, there's. Oh yeah, there was one other guideline I wanted to add, which is support the underdog.
And why
And
shouldn't France support Sardinia? It's big bad Austria.
Yeah. Then why
They-
shouldn't like?
well,
You're
it goes both
contradicting
ways. No. It depends
so
on the
Austria should support
situation.
Sardinia against France.
Yes.
Yes, of course. Of course.
Right.
Or it's like
That's my
how
words.
in the Saturaty game, right? Sealder was being a total dick to the Colombia player, so Gaku supported his independence.
Yeah.
Colombia was free.
Oh,
Um,
didn't that piss
but-
off Soto?
That's
Little
why
bit.
Sealder like rage quit in that game.
Yeah. But you know, he was powerful on his own. But I think as a general rule, and I was thinking about this too lately. I've gotten a new appreciation for Slazer's approach because oftentimes this is gonna sound crazy, but oftentimes in the Saturday games, in the ranked games, Slazer was the big loser. Like he would just come out completely on the bottom. But the reason why is because he was always supporting the underdog and going down with him. So it's like, at his own expense, he would be supporting the losing side, and then he would lose along with him. And I didn't really see it that way at the time, but it's like, you know, he was trying to balance out the game, even in a game where he was supposed to be trying to be number one. So I have a new respect for that, I think.
Slazer's the
Yeah,
new
but
idol.
Slazer's
He's
still
the
a
hero
horrible
of
cuck.
the story.
Yeah. As odd as that sounds to those who know anything about Slazer.
Slazer, we were wrong. Come
Yeah.
back.
And now we're gonna worship the economy guide as our
We
holy
can
book.
worship
That's
the
it. You
surge.
gotta watch that economy guide before every game. Even if it's
Pin it
EU4.
You gotta pin it to the Discord.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
All 40
How
minutes
long
of
is
it.
his economy guy?
It's
Oh,
40 minutes. I think.
why?
That's
Slater?
long.
It's a long
Why?
time to describe how to put sliders to max.
Uh-huh.
Is his advice even good in the video? It's been so long since I watched
Let's
it.
see,
Is it
Berg-
actually good advice?
Burgundy says no min-maxing against role players seems a bit silly. Not being able to min-max against a role player is not like being able to declare war on the Ottomans one session because they're protected. I'm not sure what you mean. The idea is, if someone is a role player, they're probably not as good of a player, and because they are not as good of a player, then min-maxing against them is going to not only put you at a huge advantage against them, but like to the point where it's not even remotely fair. So if they're role playing, I would say just let them keep doing what they're doing.
Is that why Gurren beat the living shit out of Eisen?
Out of who?
Eisen?
Probably.
In that game I played.
Is that where
Eisen
he
was
was,
UK,
he was USA?
Gurren was US, yeah.
Well, that was just USA being a lot stronger than UK as well.
It's part of it's skill, but part of it's just the trend that the people who even if you are a great player, if you're role playing, you're not going to be playing at your most efficient. So you're taking it.
Versus someone who's
It's
doing
very
everything.
easy to
Also
take
called
advantage
big
of that.
Navy win. Like whoever has the bigger
Well,
Navy
one
wins
thing
that
is,
fight.
I think you should kind of talk to role players and make them realize that they should probably control, min-max their nation correctly, but more roleplay in the fact in their own expansion and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
sometimes they just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, min-max, but at the same time, if you roll, and there's a big part of min-maxing into where you expand. It's not quite as prevalent in Victoria 2 as it is in EU4.
Well,
but
no,
where
in
you
Mayo and
expand
Tax,
is as much.
like I said, a France who's committed all their resources to expansion could theoretically lose to a Milan who's committed all their resources into growing tall in Mayo and Taxes.
Yes,
Because
but
Milan, because by late game, Milan will probably have 4 or 5 techs over France, building tall.
Maybe. Depends on a lot of things.
Yeah, like Gaku was beating me out when I was Italy, but he was beating me on tech just because of institutions and whatnot.
Yeah, I always focus on and ideas too. I always get the ideas to give you bonus in tech because if it's a long
Money.
game and people don't rage quit and end it early, then you know it helps
Yeah.
you in the long run. Education also. But the
I
gist of it, Burgundy, is not just min-maxing and role-playing, but more taking advantage of someone who isn't playing at their most optimum. Because, like, technically, you would say that's what you're supposed to do. You know, crush the weak first and then use that power to crush the strong next. But I don't think that makes for a good game.
Yeah, especially because like
Oh, Burgundy? The top ones there, that's fine. The top ones there are just guidelines, like rules to live by, which is like, you know, if you do these things, then we will probably have a better game, whereas the things on the bottom are the actual rules and changes that we're going to make, that are going to be
Or at
enforced.
least
try
Also,
to.
Look
if you
at-
are doing if you're seriously doing the loot thing, you need to just remove all of the other effects from picking your looting level. Because
Why?
the AE amount should be the decision in how much loot you take. Because otherwise you can be forced to make your army better, you can be forced to take more AE or take
No, it's the other way around.
No, you get morale bonus, big morale bonus. If you do max looting, you get large morale bonus.
Yeah, you get 10%, which is useful in the early game. But
No, you don't get 10%.
Yeah, you do.
max looting
Unless
is
they
10%
change
morale. Which is useful to a point, but in the late game you're going to want the discipline. But in the late game is also when it becomes the bigger issue, because that's when the provinces have grown, and you know,
I would argue AE is much more issue in the beginning of the game than the late game, because in the late game you eat coalitions, especially if alliances and stuff are formed, because you're mainly just at players or killing AI off in Asia, which has no tech nor the power you do.
Oh, also, is joining a AE-based coalition considered an alliance, like a diplomatic action? I don't think it should be.
It's so rare.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be, because that's
Yeah, but it's something that should be clarified before.
it's very specific in its what it can do.
Everything below number 6 is either a rule change, it's actually a game. The other stuff is just guidelines Burgundy to make you better.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of this discussion, Burgundy, is to make games last longer.
And
So
more enjoyable
having
for everyone. Yeah. Not just longer, but longer in a way that's better for everyone that's taking part.
Yeah.
There was another sort of general trend or idea I wanted to propose, which is really hard to quantify, but the general idea is that I think a Marshall Plan is better than an annexation, which is if you beat someone in a war, you don't have to be enemies until the end of the game. You can work together afterwards, because the alternative is what we see, which is you beat someone once and you hate each other forever, and then you keep killing each other until one of you dies.
Don't do a Treaty of Versailles.
Well, I mean, if you own their cores, they're gonna be pissed forever, even if they do
Maybe.
work together.
Maybe.
Like if you're playing Austria and Italy owns South Tyrol, you might work together, but you're still gonna be pissed forever.
Sure.
Underneath all that,
Which
you're gonna be angry.
they shouldn't necessarily be like, you know.
Is that
Well,
because
I mean, you can be long-term angry, but that doesn't mean you have to be short-term angry.
okay?
I'm
You
not saying
should
you can't
not
work
have
together.
a.
You can work together, but it's just
I have to make a
that's
Treaty of
always gonna
Versailles.
it's always gonna be contentious.
I'm gonna put it this way. I think that's the result of the way games are played now. Because if it weren't for the way that people go for the, me above everyone else, and victory at all costs, and 100% war score victories, and
Yeah.
coalitions, if it weren't for all of that, then you could say you could be okay with someone having a few of your cores. And then later on in the game you could say, okay, well, I'll help you out in exchange for those cores back, and maybe get them back. But that's not a possibility right now.
Yeah, don't go for a Treaty of Versailles, go for something else.
Still pissed.
Kind of a shame
I don't
that
give a shit what
the
any of you
EU
say.
devs haven't added a mechanic where you can exchange things in a peace deal instead of only take.
Well, that's like a fundamental
One
game
thing
that
is,
can't be changed.
Well, yeah. I
one
know
way
what
you
you're
can
saying.
go to that
They changed
more
forts.
towards that style of play, Gaku, is I think
Yeah.
modding the abandoned core to not make you lose prestige.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
Like
There were definitely times where I wanted to click that, or I have wanted to click that, but it's
actually
just like,
maybe even have it give you prestige.
Yeah,
That way,
that's a good idea.
where there's some sort of benefit, because it's like, wow, this person was willing to give up that for a more friend, like, you know, stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense, actually.
Like, instead of losing 10 prestige, have you gained 10 prestige?
Yeah.
And making cell provinces not costing prestige either to make treaties a bit.
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
Also, having a rule where something like, oh, if you have say I'm at war with you, and we're like, okay, so what we're going to do is, I take your province and then pay you after the war, since you can't send gifts. Like, you know, make it a rule where if you say something like that, you have to follow. Like,
Well, that's the idea
no.
behind treaties, because, you know,
Enforce
sometimes
honesty.
people don't do it, but, you know, it's...
But I'm saying, because there's no gameplay mechanic for give and take in wars,
Sure.
have a rule mechanic where it's like, okay, so this is going to be our peace deal. I'm attacking you for the ability to buy the land, stuff like that.
I mean, the rule would just be that you have to abide by peace terms,
Yeah.
whatever that happens to be.
Also, something that may want to get added in is that you can sell spy provinces from your rival. Maybe remove that.
That might be hard coded.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look.
It's something that they added in, so I doubt it's coded.
No, lots of stuff that they've added in is hard coded, like how great powers are determined. That's hard coded.
Hang on, there's something
For some
in the...
reason.
There's,
Which doesn't make any sense.
There's a few things
And like
in the chat
power
here.
projection. Power projection would be a great way actually to maybe measure some stuff, like if you could modify it. But no, you can't do that because reasons.
See, Burgundy says half the people who play this game are angry people. If they lose a single province, they'll coalition against you for the rest of the game. That's very true.
I
Let's
wouldn't know
see.
anybody like that.
Cough cough chubby, cough
You
cough.
don't even need to lose land against some people.
Cough cough, just
Like me.
everybody annex Juby, cough cough.
So
cough,
Burgundy says that giving away provinces, giving you prestige would be taken advantage of, but I don't really see that. I mean, getting prestige, the things you can do with prestige are pretty limited. I mean, unless you just want that plus 50 stability points or something, which, you know.
The less aggressive expansion is pretty useful, but like I said in chat, you'd still be, every time you sell a province or even abandon the province, you lose the admin points you invested in that.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and honestly, I view the admin points more valuable than the prestige.
I do too.
Unless you're like Milan and Meow, but otherwise, yeah.
Also, can we not play the whatchamacallit? Can we get rid of the? Can we not run with the no griefing whatever settings? Because it's just
No
ridiculous.
nation ruining.
No nation
Yeah,
ruining.
that setting in itself is dumb because it stops you from like no CBing, and there are plenty of times where you can validly no CB someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we can keep people from rage quitting and ruining their nations, then sure.
Most people don't actually ruin their nation.
You do. Fuck.
I mean,
My
There
nation
are
is ruined, and that's why I rate.
intentional though, Gok.
Yes.
Gaku, there are
Gaku, there's a
autosaves for a
difference.
reason. Like, losing a year when someone rage quits and then permanently banning them isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a difference. I rage quit because I ruined my nation. It's not. I don't ruin my nation because I rage quit. There's a difference. I'm just bad at the game.
That's true.
So bad.
Sometimes you get annexed.
Okay, but here's the thing though, like, even if you do ruin your nation, really you should be trying to fix it and learn from the process, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, even if you have to say to someone, I need your help, you know, it's still better that you fix it than just go ruin the next nation.
Please give me my land back. Please.
I do learn from my mistakes, and two, I would do that more often. But again, it's that environment where people cook you over if they know you're that bad off.
Well,
So you're better off just leaving.
Who was playing as England when in that old Meow game where it was Gaku in Hungary and Burgundy in Florence? Who was playing England where they just like gave Scotland all of their land? And then thought that they could release and play as them?
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Wait, what?
Go. It's the last EU4 series Gaku uploaded on YouTube. It's like one of the last couple of episodes. Too.
Oh, is that what happened to England? I was wondering. What did the AI do to my? Because I left like a.
Yeah, like Gaku looks
I lost
away
internet.
from England and Scotland existing, like England owning Scotland as a vassal, right? And Gaku looks away. He looks back like 5 or 10 minutes later, and it's all Scotland except for one little province of England.
Yeah, they should have just been able to release Scotland. Or just literally swap Scotland on a rehost.
I don't remember why he didn't switch or what the final issue was there.
He thought he could push the release and play as button, but he forgot that you have to annex them and then push that button when you release a vassal. So
yeah.
So he could have just beaten England in the war.
Well, no, but he thought he could like just flip in the middle of the session over to Scotland, but he can't do that.
You guys could have just rehosted for him.
But why?
Because it's a thing to let a player.
He literally just ruined his nation.
Like, wow, I'm going to intentionally ruin my nation to, well, no, it's like, I'm going to intentionally lose a war to one nation and then switch and play that nation.
Yeah.
Well, wait, Scotland wasn't his subject? I thought it was his subject.
It was his subject. That's the thing.
Hey,
well, if it was his subject, then it could have been. That's a legitimate thing to do, just to swap to a nation.
Hey,
we don't need to be talking about Scotland, alright?
Why not? Is that you? Did you do that?
That was a while ago, but yeah.
That was something.
You should feel proud of yourself, Ottoman.
I thought maybe.
So what we're doing is looking at guidelines, rules, and mod changes that would make things more pleasant in the future, regardless of how countries turn out. So I think we're well on our way.
Is there a Google Doc or something?
No, it's just local, but.
And he's showing it on his stream, so you can just look at that.
Yeah.
WordPad.
Alright.
I think a Google Doc might be a decent idea. But a lot of this stuff I'm going to be discussing in a YouTube video I'm going to be making. It's the last of the War Room videos for the series. And then some of it's just rules, and then some of it's mod changes to make it less annoying to do things that seem very reasonable, like giving up cores, for example.
Alright.
The gist of it is, well, there's a list here. Be prepared to face the consequences of your actions. So that means, don't be a dick if you don't want to be a dick to yourself. And that also means don't go way overboard and then get pissed off when it doesn't work and rage quit. So be satisfied with less than 100% war score, and in general limit the scope of your wars. And we have a rule about that now where you have to actually declare what you're, or state what you're declaring war for. So you can't just like, oh, I'm declaring for a province. By the way, I'm taking 100% if you surrender. So that will make things less cumbersome in dealing with the peace deals, because it's like you don't have to pause and argue for an hour about a peace deal, you know. If it's that way.
Speaking of that, when you loot provinces in Mayo, they can lose population and be cheaper to take. Will
That's
it be
true.
before? Will it be before the war score at start of war or war score at end of war?
I would think at the start of the war.
Okay. Yeah, you just have to mark down how much war score it was at the start of the war.
Yeah, just be aware. Also, as a general guideline, and I'm not sure how much of this you were privy to, but we're going to limit diplomacy to just before the session for a number of reasons. That's a general guideline and a gentleman's rule, because people go way over.
What?
People go way overboard, and the people that scheme all week long are essentially just doing nothing but making a coalition behind everyone else's back. And also, it doesn't give other people time to respond to the diplomacy that's taking place.
So, okay, so only in-game diplomacy. Got it.
Not just in-game, but like, say 30
Just
minutes
like
before
30
the session. So,
Alright.
it puts everyone on a more even footing, where the people who are super tryhards don't get a huge advantage.
You're still allowed to, like...
How do you know if they're scheming?
It says it's a
Honor
gentleman's agreement. You just have to...
No.
Honor.
Gaku, what's it called? Would things like war rep and money be considered valid for taking every war, or what? Would
Sure.
you just say like,
You'd have to state it.
and then like how would money work? Would it be like, oh, I'm going to take up to 10 war score worth of money, or what? Since of course the amount of money you
Yeah.
can take you won't know beforehand.
Well, you can always take one loan worth, whatever that is. And you could say
Well, it's
all
the
money
whole
plus one
treasury.
loan. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever that happens to be. And then they could say the same in reverse, right? So probably.
Perhaps you could like state an amount that seems like but when you declare the war, state an amount that seems like reasonable, and then when you go into the peace deal or whatever, if the target country doesn't have that amount, you just take as much as you can, I guess. But
Yeah.
that would kind of have to.
But the
honor.
reason for stating is because if you surrender, then that's like the max they can take, or like say the attacker surrenders, then that's the max the defender can take. So that's why it's kind of worth knowing before or after.
Maybe
like
set a percentage war score of money you're gonna take would probably be the simplest.
Well, it's also true that you can temporarily hide your money during a peace deal, right? You can
Yes.
build a ton of troops and then
yeah.
cancel them all. So
That's
really,
also just kind of a gentleman's thing.
I really think that just saying money plus a loan is the best way to do it, because I mean, even if, well, let's say 200 plus a loan, right? If they don't have 200, then they could still agree to it and just give you the rest of it later.
Yeah.
Really, it's just the terms that they're saying. It's not. It doesn't have to be specific, or it can be specific, and you can just agree to it and honor it later. But the idea is you can't do cheesy war CB nonsense where it's like, oh, I'm declaring for one province, but now I'm going to take 100%, and it has nothing to do with that one province. By the way, everyone who's joining against you is taking part of the 100%, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and any time a nation joins, it should pause and they'd be able to add any rules they wish
What
to
are
add.
separate peace rules? Like, for example, can like say Milan and Spain declare war on France,
yeah.
and they all and Milan wants to do separate peace. How would that work?
You know, I'm not sure. I think if France agreed to it, then they should be allowed to take up to however much they agree on, in principle, because otherwise they wouldn't surrender, right?
Yeah.
So like if together they want more than 100%, then France obviously wouldn't surrender to that. But again, it comes down to what they declare for. So if they declare for something that's over 100%, obviously they can't ever take it, right? So they would have to declare first what they want, and if the war goes on, and I guess I didn't state it, but like in the Victoria 2 rules, you know, if it's been going for a year, then you can modify what you're declaring for. So if it's like been over a year, then you could change it. You have to declare what you're changing, and at that point, as long as it's under 100%, you just keep adding to it.
Can you remove war goals or only add? I assume only add, right?
Yeah, only add, but you could not take them, but you can't add more than 100 or change them that way.
So you can't ask for more than 100.
No. Well,
Yeah.
as if you
And
agreed to it, you could, but
the
in
other
principle,
thing
no.
is, say same situation. Spain and Milan declare war on France. France is winning. They total ask for 50 war score at the beginning. If he convinces Milan to separate peace, is he spending part of 50 of his own war score, or is he?
I would say separate pieces are always independent.
Okay, so then it would just be. Is he still limited by the 50 war score?
Well,
or
it depends. Is it like if you enforce peace, if you full occupy and then do it, I would say it'd have to be additive. But if it's not, if it's agreed to, then no. Then I think it could be in addition.
Yeah, the thing I was gonna say is that if you are you going to allow them, that's up to you to decide, to demand more than 100% war score. Because if they force peace out, you can force peace out more than 100% war score.
That's what I'm saying. If you agree to it, then that's on you. And you can agree to whatever you like. But if
they can't demand, they can't force more than 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
If it's a surrender, if you hit the, unconditional surrender button, then it gets added to the total. And then it would be, they could take whatever they want out of Milan, but then they'd be that much, 100 minus that out of Spain, assuming it was 100%. But like,
they need to kind of push, and you need to write that somewhere down and clarify, because that could lead to some issues.
Yeah, we'll get that straightened out. As far as other guidelines, in general, because role players tend to not be as efficient, the idea is to not take advantage of, in this case, role players. So basically, don't take advantage of people who don't know what they're doing more than you have to. So, like, if Last Resort is playing next to you, don't annex Last Resort necessarily.
Thanks.
I don't know.
I think there's, of course, I think there's some sort of, like if he's playing Serbia or like Wallachia and you're playing Hungary, of course you can't, obviously I can't think of a more, or like Teutons in Poland. You can't really expect the Poland to not take over the Teutons.
I can, and then
Wait, could you make it so that you are only able to like vassalize or whatever?
I mean, this is
another player.
This isn't a rule. This is a guideline. So it's like, just as a player, think more along the lines of
Yeah, but like, would I be not following the guidelines if I just vassalized?
That'd be perfectly legitimate, and
I also think people need to be more. I think people need to be more accepting to the fact that being a vassal isn't necessarily a bad thing with a benevolent overlord.
That's true.
Oh no,
no.
One of the most OP
I've played entire games as a vassal and been extremely powerful. It's not like actually that bad.
Yeah, one of the most OP things.
Personal union by Rome.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Like, if you have a benevolent overlord, sometimes it's better just to be loyal and helpful than to try and get free because of the effort it takes.
One of the more powerful things I remember that used to occur a lot in multiplayer before people edited it in vanilla was you would have just Hungary and Austria. Austria would be a player, and Hungary under the PU would just be essentially a permanent ally of Austria.
Yeah. And would vassals and personal unions count towards the alliances? So, for example, say
if it were a player, yeah.
Yeah, like
otherwise, no.
In the Poland Teuton situation, if Poland takes the event for a Prussian vassal, that will count?
Yeah.
Okay.
The next guideline is also sort of a rule, which needs to be worked on. But basically, the idea is, the more powerful you are among players, the less alliances and effective alliances you can have. So if you're the most powerful player, then you're not allowed to, well, you might have one alliance, but you're not allowed to have like 5 alliances. If you're the second most powerful player, and we're talking about in terms of income, we thought was the most fair way to do this. So like, if you have the highest income as a player, you could have, say, 1 ally. And this could be 1 ally or 1 Condatorati you rent out, or 1 guarantee.
At a time.
Yeah, and this also accounts for AIs. So if you're playing, say, the Ottomans, then you're not allowed to ally anyone else, basically, unless there's someone more powerful than you.
I have like one dip, what's the word?
Relation?
Yeah.
Well, it's
sorry.
not just relations because there's other ways around it, right? But it's basically,
Condatorati.
yeah, you can have one effective military / diplomatic relation with another country that isn't fully diplomatic, like a royal marriage would be. You could have as many of those as you want.
One thing is, I think warning should not count to that, since that's more of maintaining buffer states than it is for, like,
Yeah,
for example,
probably right
like,
about that.
Warning is the exact
like
opposite.
if
Right,
I
George.
warn Hungary as the Ottomans, it's for the purpose of maintaining a buffer state, not
Sure.
for stopping the expansion of the Ottomans, since it
Yeah.
only
Well, no, it's like joining a coalition. That's not a counts
No.
against it.
warning you
It's an
only
offensive thing.
Well, no, guaranteeing is a defensive thing theoretically, but
But warning is an offensive thing. You don't gain any benefit other than a potential CB. It's the same thing as fabricating a warning someone.
What could be defensive? Like you're trying to
Yeah.
keep them away from you.
It's more
Yes,
defensive.
but you.
since it's more of protecting yourself rather than stopping other people.
Where it
Yeah.
becomes an issue is where you warn one player next to another one who's also next to you. Since, like, you have a sort of an alliance if that person is attacked, you know? And that's why I said warnings were also included. But really, it depends on the situation, I think. So, like, if player A has made it known that they want to attack player B, and then player C warns player A just so they can come in on behalf of player B, then that's an alliance, even if it's technically a warning.
How
But-
does GP interventions work?
I think
They don't. They don't ever work. They're just dumb. Don't do them. They make no
But if
sense.
it does work somehow,
They don't.
I mean,
They
if you have
really
the
don't.
ability to do great power interventions, why can't you?
Yeah, I mean, it would count as an alliance as long as you have a free slot. You can do it. I just say it's stupid in general. I've never really seen one. I thought, I really want to jump into
Well, but,
this
like,
random
okay.
war on behalf of
Okay,
someone
here's
else.
the question though. Like, what if you're also following the support the underdog principle,
Yep.
and so you're number one,
Yeah.
but let's say you already have a different ally,
Yeah.
but then you see like players number 5 and 6 getting beaten up by like 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Is that still an alliance?
Yeah, you would have to break the other one. So the idea is, the lower you are in the rankings, the more effective alliances you're allowed to have. So, like, the number one player could have either 0 or 1, depending on how we want to set that. The next most powerful player could have 1 more than that, and then so on down the list. So, like, the least
I
powerful
think every
player,
should be able to have one.
probably. But the least
Yeah.
powerful player would have the most potential allies, and that includes AIs too. Because
Now, here's-
another situation we had in the Sunday game where we were talking about this earlier. France wasn't allowed to ally all these different people because of the rules, right? And the rules were until a certain date, France isn't allowed to ally XYZ, ABC, whoever. So what they did instead is they just ally every single AI around them. And this gets around that problem because it doesn't allow the most powerful players to ally all the AIs and cock block the other players that way.
But cock blocking is fun.
But
I won't ever be able
So-
to do
It's
it.
not.
because
You
have a
realize
powerful player.
you're the person who's been cock blocked more than anyone else in this group, most likely.
Now, something else is, are verbal guarantees the same as mechanical guarantees?
Nope. Nope,
So,
that's diplomacy.
So theoretically, is receiving a enforced peace an alliance or only giving, or neither?
I don't know, that's tricky. I think
'Cause,
if you're doing the enforcing, obviously that's a diplomatic action, right? And that's an
Sounds
alliance.
like somebody's kicking their dog.
But
in.
say
my dog
France and
heard
Ottomans,
someone outside, so now she's upset.
Well, say France and Ottomans are number 1 and 2, respectively.
Hmm.
And Ottomans declare war on France, bringing in their however many, and France has their however many. If it's 0, however many.
Sure.
Theoretically, could then 4 players enforce peace on the side of France? Then, however, France plus however many plus the 4 players versus Ottomans.
Oh, no, I don't think that would work. It would have to be on both sides.
But
So-
at the same time, the Ottomans.
But you can't enforce peace to help the attacker.
That's true.
Well, y-
And
what-
you can't take stuff.
whatever way I said it wrong, you still understand the point of what I'm saying, though, right?
Yeah. If
I might have like said like, oh, this person attacking this person in the wrong order. You still get what I mean.
I think that's a very rare situation that
But it's
Yeah,
worth
not-
ironing out
I don't-
before people try and get around the rule.
I don't think it's not only unlikely, it's like completely, it's almost impossible, because you'd have to be at 100 relations with that person, right?
Which isn't that difficult if you're planning on enforcing.
Oh,
Like
if
I
you're
could,
planning on
I
it,
could
right?
verbal, like yeah, if you're
Don't they have to
planning
be
on
weaker
using
than you
enfor-
too?
No, you can enforce peace on anyone that has 100 relations.
Huh.
Ulm could enforce peace on France.
Well,
No,
that's
I know
awkward.
because I've enforced peace on an Ottoman versus Austria war as Brandenburg.
Yeah, I'd say it would have to account for a diplomatic slot on both sides, the person being enforced on and the enforcer, and I would say also that the person being enforced on, the one being enforced on behalf of, would have to agree to it. So otherwise you have situations where someone just like enforces on everyone just out of the blue, and there's like, I didn't want you to do that, and they do it anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think they would have to agree to it.
Wait, I thought you have to accept all enforcery is mechanically in the game. You
I'm
can't
saying-
just enforce peace without them accepting it. I think.
I don't think the
No, you
defender has
have-
to enforce
No.
peace. Or the defender has to accept. I think only the attacker has to accept.
Are there any rules against forever alliances? Burgundy asked. Technically, no. No, and with the system, it would just be limiting how many alliances you could have. So if you
Why
want,
would the attacker ever accept?
why
The
would-
defender has to accept
If-
and enforce peace, not the
well,
attacker.
No. The attacker decides, because if the attacker accepts the enforced peace, then the war is a white peace. If the attacker declines the enforced peace, then the war continues. But the
in fact-
enforcer is on the defender's
I,
side.
in fact, know the defender does not have to accept because what had happened was in that same war, at some point where we thought we were going to start winning and it was just a matter of time, someone enforced peace and the Ottomans accepted and the Austria got pissed off because he was really angry that the war ended with a white peace at that point.
Yeah, I could see where that would be a problem.
So you could use enforced peace as a weapon.
Theory.
Yeah, but well,
Cuck
we would
somebody using enforced peace.
we would
Here, I'm here to help.
basically there's now a rule against that though.
Why don't you have to say anything? That's the only way I'm gonna ever be able to cut people.
Good.
I put a Google Doc in the Mew thing.
All right. Let's see. As far as the other guidelines, though, well, we already went over the role player one, but that goes for anyone. Support the underdog, and I guess I didn't have on here, but well, no, I guess that's
Don't
pretty
be a
much
dick.
it. No, that's meaningless. It really is.
Well, just in general, don't be an asshole in chat.
Well, yeah. That's the guiding principle of so many groups that have completely crumbled. It's just no one has the same idea of what being a dick is, so everyone's a dick to each other in different ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, but still, it's not a bad thing to just to be nice.
I
You-
mean, being nice to
But
it's
what
a
if
war
I
game.
be nice by annexing your country?
yeah,
yeah,
it'll be
like,
really
I'm
nice.
They honestly,
Doing you a
Like
favor.
I'm protecting you. Like, oh, I'm protecting you from other people.
Hey, you know,
I
if
mean,
it's
be nice, just like
if it's a
What if-
question
what
of
if I
last
wrap my
resort.
way around your entire country so that you can't get attacked?
Hey, if it's a question between last resort playing this country or me playing this country, am I doing him a favor if I take him over? You know, I mean,
so you're probably doing the people of the country a favor, but doing me a favor.
all right. Well,
Well, no, he's making your country do better.
yeah, that's the goal, right? All right. Well, I think we're pretty well done here, unless there's anything else people want to add.
Oh, what are the mods or whatever? I've
And
well,
Neo.
we're gonna be using Mayo. This will be a new campaign starting in January, and we're gonna have to make some mod edits to try and get some of this stuff to work.
Oh, you guys are making mods, or are these just mods that are already on the Steam
Editing
workshop?
Mayo.
yeah,
Oh.
it's
If we're doing mod edits, can we also like do the thing where everyone picks their starting idea group? Or we do a nation draft maybe, and then the day before or whatever, and then have time.
Well, Burgundy did have a good point, is that if we're doing a nation draft, everyone needs to take part rather than people showing up later and, you know, it's like, I'm going to play this random country you weren't expecting to be played now. So, okay.
Alright.
Yeah, also, you know, it's last resort. Try not to not only tank your country, but then leave it like a locust.
I'm sorry, I can't control it.
Just
When I don't
complete
get internet for 6
abandonment.
weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't
wait.
have internet for 6 weeks, so I would have continued playing. Sorry.
How are you guys gonna mod the files or whatever? Like what's being changed?
They're going to shove
There's,
the dick
there's
up
a few
your butt.
things here at the bottom of the document I had on.
Wow.
Basically, loot scare is going to, if possible, give aggressive expansion directly. That way, you know, going high looting will give coalitions against you, which makes a lot of sense.
Alright.
Uncontested cores. Let's see, what is this? Oh, basically trying to get some sort of revanchism system that actually does something. Otherwise, the ability to abandon cores rather than it costing you something, giving you prestige in return. So it's like, if you're so gracious as to give up your core, then maybe you should get something for it rather than be penalized. Let's see what else. Removing Siberian frontiers from the colonies, because that's retarded. It really is. Maybe trying to add a new CB for treaty ports. So, like, rather than a conquest on, you know, a nation that you only want some coastal land from, maybe just being able to take, you know, even with a blockade, possibly. What?
Sorry, nothing.
And then
I'm doing something else at the same time.
selling provinces, not costing prestige, and then being able to sell provinces to rival, because then we could try and get around some of the weird issues that prevents, you know.
Or maybe try and just remove all restrictions from selling provinces.
Yeah, basically. So hopefully small edits, the ones that will make things a bit not only less cutthroat, but less
Multiplayer friendly.
Yeah, multiplayer friendly and less damaging to people in the long run. So there's like, you know, things people can't do just because or are unwilling to do because of the way they affect people's countries, which is understandable. But I think we're done here. So
Alright.
I'm gonna
Something
copy
to
paste
note,
this. Yeah.
I don't know if we want to change it. This is more of a balance change, but currently the 100 Years' War, it takes 2 wars for France to end it and 1 war for England. So that might be something that might want to be changed.
Nah, it's fine. England never wins the.
I don't know. In what way exactly? How does England win it?
Forcing a PU on France, but I mean,
Oh, is that right?
that's not going to happen. But
Yeah.
I was more
Wait,
talking about
doesn't
France.
that take?
Basically, that makes France's first 2. Assuming they get a white peace out of the Brittany War, that's 5 years. 100% for the first war against England, that's 15, plus however long the war starts, plus then the next war. So that means theoretically France can't declare anyone on anyone at all in the bare minimum of 20 years' time.
Is that a problem?
I don't know. I'm asking if you think that would be a problem.
Personally,
No,
I
I
don't see
think
the
that-
problem with it.
Wait,
France is so strong in the game.
wait,
already.
doesn't it take England 2 wars though in order to get the PU, since they have to finish the war they start off in the game with?
Well, yeah,
yeah.
but France is the same thing. So then that would
Oh,
mean
okay.
3 wars for France, since they have to finish the war they're in, and then 2 more wars for the land England has in France.
Alright.
Yeah, I don't see that as a
Yeah.
problem. But
Okay.
Also, we should probably do something about the papacy if anyone's getting free 500 ducats every time the Pope dies.
Why is that bad?
What?
They
What do
go
you
through the papacy. If you play them every time the Pope dies, they get 500.
They don't get 500 ducats. Every time someone does a decision or event that gives money to the Pope gets the money.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, that reminds me of something. Carnegie, do you remember what it was? But when I was playing as Naples, for some reason, I don't remember if it was because I was the papal controller, but I was able to spam against AIs and players this thing that would make them lose prestige and me gain it.
Hmm.
And I remember
It was something to do with the Pope.
Yeah, I just remember, I'll look into it, but it was like, you can make the other, some other, like, country lose 5 prestige, and you gain 5. And I just did that, like, for a whole year straight, and I went from, like, -50 to, like, 25.
Well,
Yeah, I think it was
seems a
something to do
little
with the
broken.
Pope and, like, divorces or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if it was divorces, but it was something similar.
Oh,
So-
is it with one of the events?
It's a decision you can do, but you can repeatedly do it. I think I was able to repeatedly do it because the papal state didn't exist or something. But
No, the
if it-
Pope definitely still exists.
maybe it. Oh yeah, it did because it was in France, but I can't. Whatever. There's some weird mechanic with the Pope that you can just like
That
destroy
seems
people's
more like an
prestige.
exploit. That,
It is. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Alright, well, I'm gonna kill the stream. Thanks to those of you watching.
Gaku, don't make me I don't want to have to report you to